Rain hammered the cracked windshield as Ethan's truck skidded toward the guardrail. Through the downpour, headlights illuminated a stranded Jaguar, and the woman standing beside it would destroy everything he thought he knew about survival, pride, and the goddamn unfairness of money. He should have kept driving. He should have made that blind date his sister set up. Instead, he pulled over and his entire world shattered in the best possible way. Before we dive in, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's get into it. The engine light had been on for 3 weeks. Ethan Cole knew exactly what it meant. A failing oxygen sensor, maybe $200 he didn't have, definitely something he should fix before the truck decided to die on him for real. But rent was late, again, and Sophie needed new shoes because 8-year-olds apparently grew feet like weeds, and the electric bill had that friendly little note attached. Final notice before disconnection. So the check engine light stayed on, glowing orange in the dark like a tiny middle finger from the universe. He gripped the steering wheel tighter as rain turned the Seattle streets into rivers of brake lights and frustration. The windshield wipers beat a rhythm that matched his headache. Why did you agree? Why did you agree? Why did you agree? Because Sarah wouldn't shut up about it, he muttered to himself. His sister had cornered him at Sophie's soccer game last weekend, wearing that expression she got when she'd already made decisions for him and was just waiting for him to catch up. Her name is Vivian. She's successful, she's kind, and she specifically asked for someone genuine. Successful how? Does it matter? It does if she's expecting someone who owns a suit. Sarah had grabbed his arm, her voice dropping. Ethan, you haven't been on a date since Laura left. Sophie needs to see that you're not just surviving. She needs to see you living. Low blow, bringing Sophie into it. So here he was, 20 minutes late already, wearing the one button-down shirt that didn't have grease stains, driving through a storm that was trying its absolute best to flood the city, heading toward some overpriced restaurant where a woman named Vivian would take one look at his calloused hands and scuffed boots and remember she had an early meeting tomorrow. The GPS chirped at him to take the next exit. Ethan ignored it, knowing a shortcut through the industrial district that would shave off 10 minutes. The truck's tires hissed through standing water as he turned onto Mercer Street, leaving behind the traffic and the streetlights for a stretch of road that ran between abandoned warehouses and chain-link fencing. Lightning cracked overhead, turning everything white for a heartbeat. That's when he saw the Jaguar. It was pulled halfway onto the shoulder, hazard lights blinking weakly through the rain. A vintage E-Type, British racing green, the kind of car that belonged in a museum or a millionaire's garage, not broken down on a flooded Seattle back road at 9:30 on a Tuesday night. Ethan's foot moved toward the brake before his brain caught up. Keep driving. You're already late. But his hands were already turning the wheel, pulling the truck onto the shoulder behind the Jaguar. The headlights caught a figure standing beside the car, a woman in a long coat, heels sinking into the gravel, phone pressed to her ear with the kind of rigid posture that screamed frustration. He killed the engine and sat there for a second, watching her through the rain-streaked windshield. She wasn't dressed for this weather, wasn't dressed for standing on the side of the road at all. The coat was expensive. He could tell even from here, and she wore it like armor. Turn around. This isn't your problem. Ethan grabbed his jacket from the passenger seat and stepped out into the storm. The rain hit him like a cold slap, immediately soaking through his shirt. He jogged toward the Jaguar, boots splashing through puddles, and called out over the thunder. You need help? The woman spun toward him, phone lowering. Even drenched and clearly pissed off, she was striking, sharp features, dark hair plastered to her face, eyes that assessed him in about 2 seconds flat. I've called for a tow, she said. Her voice was clipped, professional, the kind that was used to giving orders. They said 45 minutes, an hour ago. Ethan nodded toward the Jaguar. What happened? It just died. Middle of the road, no warning. She crossed her arms, and he caught the defensive shift in her stance. I can handle this. Sure. He was already walking toward the car, pulling a small flashlight from his pocket. But it's pouring, you're stuck, and I know these old Jags. If you want to wait another hour in the rain, that's your call. She didn't respond right away. He knelt beside the driver's door, shining the light underneath the chassis, then moved to pop the hood. I don't even know you, she said. Ethan Cole. He glanced back at her. I own a repair shop. Well, I'm trying to. And you are? A pause. Vivian. Nice to meet you, Vivian. Now pop the hood. He heard her huff, annoyed maybe, or just cold. But then the latch clicked and the hood lifted. Ethan propped it open and shone his light across the engine. Beautiful piece of machinery, immaculately maintained, original parts where it mattered. When did you last drive it? This morning. It was fine. And you didn't notice anything weird? Hesitation, rough idle, smell? Vivian stepped closer, close enough that he caught a hint of expensive perfume cutting through the rain and oil. No, it was perfect. Then it wasn't. Ethan traced the fuel line with his fingers, checking connections. These old fuel pumps are temperamental, especially in weather like this. He straightened, rain streaming down his face. You have an umbrella in there. Why? Because I'm about to crawl under your car, and if you hold it over me, I won't drown. For the first time, something flickered in her expression. Not quite a smile, but close. She retrieved a black umbrella from the passenger seat and held it awkwardly over him as he dropped to his back and slid beneath the Jaguar's undercarriage. Water immediately soaked through his jeans, cold, filthy water that probably had a decade's worth of road grime in it. Perfect. You don't have to do this, Vivian said above him. Little late for that. He aimed the flashlight at the fuel pump. Besides, can't let a classic die on the side of the road. It's practically criminal. You restore cars? When I can afford to. He found the problem, loose connection on the fuel pump relay. Probably vibrated free. Simple fix. Mostly I keep other people's cars running long enough that they can afford the real repairs. That's depressing. Ethan laughed, surprised. Yeah, it really is. He tightened the connection with his fingers, testing it twice to make sure it held. The rain was relentless, turning the ground beneath him into a shallow stream, but Vivian kept the umbrella steady. Her heels were probably ruined. He'd have felt bad about it if she'd seemed like the type to care. Try starting it now, he called out. She hesitated. He felt it more than saw it, then moved toward the driver's seat. A moment later, the engine turned over, coughed once, then caught, purring like it had never stopped. Ethan slid out from under the car and stood, wiping mud from his hands onto his jeans. Vivian was staring at the dashboard like she didn't quite believe it. How did you... She looked up at him, genuinely confused. The tow company said I'd need to have it transported to a shop. Yeah, because they get paid more that way. He closed the hood, latching it carefully. It was just a loose relay. Happens with older cars, especially British ones. They like to keep you guessing. Vivian stepped out of the car, umbrella still in hand, and for a long moment she just looked at him. Rain dripped from his hair, his shirt was plastered to his chest, and he was pretty sure there was mud on his face. What do I owe you? She asked. Nothing. That's not... I was driving past. Took me 5 minutes. Ethan shrugged, suddenly aware of how cold he was. Just pay it forward next time you see someone stuck. Her eyes narrowed slightly, like she was trying to figure out the catch. People didn't do things for free in her world, he guessed. Everything had a price tag. Thank you, she said finally, and it sounded like the words didn't come easily. Really, I was about to walk back to the main road. In those shoes? You'd have made it maybe 10 feet. That almost smile again. Probably. Thunder rolled overhead, and Ethan realized he was standing in the middle of a storm, soaking wet, with a stranger who drove a car worth more than his entire shop. And he was late. Very late. I have to go, he said, backing toward his truck. But drive careful. That relay might hold, but get it properly checked soon. Wait. Vivian took a step forward. At least let me give you my card, in case I need a mechanic who actually fixes things. She pulled a slim wallet from her coat and handed him a business card. Even in the dark, even soaked, it was clearly expensive, heavy stock, embossed lettering. He didn't read it, just shoved it in his pocket. Sure. Yeah. Good luck. He was in his truck, engine running, before she could say anything else. Through the rearview mirror, he watched her standing there in the rain, umbrella forgotten at her side, watching him drive away. His phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. Where are you? She's waiting. Shit. Ethan punched the gas, the truck fishtailing slightly on the wet road before finding traction. He was now officially 40 minutes late, covered in mud and road water, and smelling like he'd taken a bath in motor oil. This date was going to be a disaster. Vivian Hart stood in the rain and watched the battered truck disappear around the corner, its taillights swallowed by the storm. She was still holding the umbrella, though it wasn't doing much good anymore. Her coat was soaked through, her shoes were definitely ruined, and her carefully styled hair was a lost cause. But the car was running. That strange, grease-stained man had fixed it in under 10 minutes, refused payment, and vanished like some kind of blue-collar ghost. She should get back in the Jaguar. Drive to the restaurant where Marcus was probably already waiting, nursing his second whiskey and checking his Rolex every 30 seconds. This blind date had been Catherine's idea, her assistant, who'd somehow decided that Vivian's personal life was a project that needed managing. He's perfect, Catherine had insisted. Investment banker, Columbia MBA, knows all the right people. Translation, boring, safe, exactly like the last 5 men Catherine had set her up with. Vivian looked down at the business card she'd handed the mechanic. She'd grabbed the wrong stack this morning. These were her corporate cards, the ones with CEO, Hart Industries, printed below her name. He'd shoved it in his pocket without even glancing at it. He had no idea who she was. The thought was more refreshing than it should have been. She got back in the car, cranked the heat to maximum, and pulled onto the road. The engine hummed smoothly, perfectly, like it hadn't just stranded her in the middle of nowhere. Through the rain-streaked windshield, Seattle's downtown lights emerged. Restaurants, high-rises, the familiar landscape of power and money and careful conversations that meant nothing. Her phone buzzed. Marcus. Running 15 minutes late. Order without me if you're there. She almost laughed. 15 minutes late after she'd been stuck on the roadside for over an hour. That was Marcus. Chronically late, chronically self-absorbed, chronically convinced that his time was worth more than anyone else's. Vivian pulled into the parking garage beneath Canlis, the kind of restaurant where reservations were made months in advance and the waitstaff could smell desperation from across the room. She sat in the car for a moment, engine idling, watching well-dressed couples hurry through the rain toward the entrance. She didn't want to be here. The realization hit her with surprising clarity. She didn't want to sit across from Marcus and pretend to be interested in his portfolio or his last trip to the Maldives or whatever corporate acquisition he was currently orchestrating. She didn't want to smile at his mediocre jokes or deflect his hand when it inevitably found her knee under the table, but Catherine would ask how it went. And the board members who thought she was too young, too cold, too focused on business would whisper about how Vivian Hart couldn't even maintain a personal life. And her mother would call with that particular tone of disappointment reserved for daughters who'd chosen empires over families. So Vivian checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, fixed her smudged mascara with her thumb, and stepped out into the rain one more time. The restaurant was exactly as she'd expected. Soft lighting, expensive art, tables positioned for maximum privacy and minimum genuine connection. The maitre d' recognized her immediately. "Ms. Hart, your table is ready. Your companion hasn't arrived yet." Of course he hasn't. She followed him through the dining room, past couples leaning close over candlelight, past businessmen closing deals over aged whiskey, to a corner table with a view of the city lights bleeding through the rain. She ordered a gin martini and checked her phone. A text from Catherine. "Good luck. Be charming." Vivian almost threw the phone across the room. Instead, she opened her email and tried to focus on the quarterly reports that had been waiting since this afternoon. Revenue was up. Expenses were down. The expansion into Southeast Asian markets was proceeding ahead of schedule. Everything was perfect. Everything was always perfect in the carefully constructed world of Hart Industries. She took a long drink of her martini and thought about the mechanic. Ethan, he'd said. The way he'd knelt in the mud without hesitation, the practiced confidence of his hands, the absolute lack of interest in who she was or what she could do for him. When was the last time someone had looked at her like that? Like she was just a person stuck on the side of the road, not a name on a Forbes list or a face in a corporate headshot? She couldn't remember. "Ms. Hart?" Vivian looked up. The maitre d' was back, his expression carefully neutral in a way that suggested bad news. "Your companion called. He's going to be another 30 minutes. He apologizes for the inconvenience." She set down her martini very carefully. "Did he?" "He suggested you order an appetizer. He's happy to reimburse you." For a moment, Vivian just stared at him. Then she started laughing, Not the polite corporate laugh she'd perfected over years of board meetings and investor dinners, but a real laugh that made the couple at the next table glance over in surprise. "You know what?" She stood, grabbing her purse. "Tell Marcus not to bother. I have somewhere else to be." The maitre d' blinked. "Of course, shall I, But Vivian was already walking toward the exit, heels clicking on the polished floor, still slightly damp from the rain and not caring at all. She handed the valet her ticket and waited under the awning, watching the storm tear through the city with something almost like approval. Her phone buzzed. Marcus. "There in 20, order the oysters." She blocked his number. The Jaguar pulled up, and Vivian tipped the valet double what the service was worth. She slid into the driver's seat, and the engine started perfectly on the first try, because a stranger named Ethan had fixed it in the rain without asking for anything in return. She pulled out of the garage and pointed the car south, toward home, toward the empty penthouse, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and its view of absolutely nothing that mattered. Halfway there, she pulled over. The business card was still in her coat pocket, the one Ethan had given her. Except he hadn't given her anything. She'd given him her card and he'd shoved it away without looking, but he'd said he owned a repair shop. In Seattle. How many could there be? Vivian pulled out her phone and typed, "Mechanic Ethan Cole." Seattle. The results loaded slowly, the storm interfering with the signal. Then a name appeared. Cole's Auto Repair, Georgetown District. The reviews were mixed. 5 stars from people who praised the honest work and fair prices. 2 stars from people who complained about the unprofessional location and lack of amenities. One review just said, "Ethan saved my car and probably saved my job. We'll never go anywhere else." There was a photo. A small, cramped garage with 2 bays and a tiny office that looked like it was held together with duct tape and hope. And standing in front of it, arms crossed, was the man who'd fixed her car in the rain. He looked tired in the photo, tired and determined and nothing like the polished businessmen who orbited her world. Vivian saved the address. She didn't know why, didn't know what she'd do with it. But sitting in her car while rain hammered the roof, still damp from standing on the side of the road, still holding an umbrella over a stranger who'd helped her without wanting anything in return, she saved the address. Mag. Ethan made it to the restaurant at 10:15. The hostess took one look at him, mud-splattered jeans, soaked shirt, hair dripping water onto the polished marble floor, and her professional smile faltered. "I'm meeting someone," he said quickly. "Reservation under, He realized he didn't know Vivian's last name. Maybe under Sarah Cole? Or Vivian? The hostess's smile returned, colder this time. "I'm sorry, sir. We have a dress code." "Right. Yeah. But I'm late and she's probably been waiting and I'm afraid I can't seat you in your current state." She glanced pointedly at his boots, which were leaving small puddles on the floor. "Perhaps you'd like to reschedule?" Heat crawled up Ethan's neck. Not anger exactly. Just the familiar, exhausting weight of not belonging. Of being the wrong kind of person in the wrong kind of place. "Can you at least tell her I'm here? Just tell her Ethan is here and I'm sorry I'm late." The hostess picked up the phone with the kind of exaggerated patience usually reserved for children and difficult customers. "What name is the reservation under?" "I don't know. Vivian. First name Vivian." A pause. "We don't have any reservations under that name." "Are you sure? Maybe it's under a different—" "Sir." The hostess set down the phone. "We don't have anyone by that name waiting, and I'm going to have to ask you to leave if you're not a guest." Ethan stood there, dripping water, feeling the eyes of well-dressed diners turning toward him with the kind of casual disdain reserved for people who didn't understand that you needed reservations made 3 months in advance. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out. Screen cracked, case held together with electrical tape, and saw a text from Sarah. "She left. She said you never showed." "What happened?" "Shit," he muttered. The hostess cleared her throat. "Sir?" "Yeah, I'm leaving." Ethan turned toward the door, boots squelching, and walked back out into the rain. He sat in his truck for a long time, engine off, staring at the restaurant through the rain-streaked windshield. Somewhere in there, at some table he'd never see, a woman named Vivian had waited for him, had checked her watch, had ordered a drink, had eventually given up and left. And he'd been on the side of the road, fixing a stranger's car, getting soaked to the bone for someone who didn't even say thank you properly. His phone rang. Sarah. He answered. I know. What happened? I stopped to help someone. Car broke down. I fixed it, and then I was late, and he dragged a hand through his wet hair. It doesn't matter. She left. Ethan. Sarah's voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. You can't keep doing this. Doing what? Putting everyone else first. You stopped for a stranger instead of showing up for yourself. She was stranded, Sarah. What was I supposed to do? Show up on time, just once. Show up for something that's about you, not about fixing someone else's problem. The words hit harder than they should have. Ethan closed his eyes, listening to the rain hammer the roof. I'm tired, he said finally. I know. I don't know how to do this, the dating thing, the trying thing. I know. A pause. But Sophie needs to see you try, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. He thought about his daughter, asleep at Sarah's house right now, wearing her favorite dinosaur pajamas and probably clutching the stuffed elephant she'd had since she was 3. Sophie, who asked him every morning if he was happy, like an 8-year-old should have to monitor her father's emotional state. I'll try, he said. Good. Now go home, take a hot shower, and tomorrow you're going to text Vivian and apologize. I don't have her number. I'll send it to you. Text her. Explain what happened. Maybe she'll give you another shot. Sarah, text her, Ethan. She hung up. Ethan sat in the dark, rain turning the world outside into a blur, and wondered how his life had become this small, this careful, this afraid. His phone buzzed. A number he didn't recognize and a message from Sarah. This is Vivian. Be brave. He stared at the screen for a long time. Then he started typing. This is Ethan. I'm so sorry about tonight. I stopped to help someone whose car broke down, and by the time I got to the restaurant, you'd already left. I know that sounds like an excuse, but it's the truth. If you're willing to give me another chance, I promise I'll show up on time. I understand if you're not interested. You deserve better than someone who shows up late and covered in mud. He read it 3 times, deleted it twice, then finally hit send before he could overthink it anymore. The message showed as delivered, then, a moment later, read. He waited. Rain drummed on the roof. His phone stayed silent. Finally, after what felt like an hour but was probably only 5 minutes, 3 dots appeared. Vivian was typing. The dots disappeared. Appeared again. Disappeared. Then, what kind of car? Ethan blinked at the screen. What? The car that broke down, what kind was it? He hesitated, then typed, Vintage Jaguar E-Type, British racing green, beautiful car, loose fuel pump relay. The response was immediate. That was my car. For a second, Ethan just stared at the words, brain refusing to process them. Then, you're Vivian, and you're the mechanic who fixed my Jaguar. You were the blind date, and you were mine. Ethan started laughing, couldn't help it. The absurdity of it, fixing her car, getting soaked to the bone, rushing to a restaurant where she'd already left, only to discover that the woman he'd helped and the woman he was supposed to meet were the same person. His phone buzzed again. Are you laughing at me? No. At the universe. This is insane. Agreed. A pause. Then, the restaurant wouldn't let you in, would they? How did you know? Because I saw you through the window. Walking in, soaking wet, leaving puddles everywhere. And I was sitting at a table by myself, checking my phone, completely unaware that you were the person I'd been waiting for. Ethan's chest tightened. You were there? I'd already paid for my drink and left through the back entrance. I didn't know. If I'd known, we're both idiots. Completely. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, there's a diner on Madison. It's open until midnight, if you want to try this again. Ethan looked at the clock on his dashboard. 10:47 p.m. His jeans were still soaked, his shirt was beyond saving, and he probably smelled like wet dog and motor oil. He typed, I'll be there in 10 minutes. I'll order coffee. He started the engine, and this time when the check engine light came on, he just laughed. The diner was called Rosie's, and it looked exactly like every other late-night Seattle diner. Vinyl booths patched with duct tape, fluorescent lights that hummed too loud, a jukebox in the corner that probably hadn't worked since 1987. The smell of coffee and grease hung in the air like a permanent fixture. Ethan spotted Vivian immediately. She was sitting in a corner booth, still wearing the expensive coat, but looking somehow different than she had on the roadside. Less guarded, maybe. Or just exhausted. Her hair was starting to dry, curling slightly at the ends, and she'd wiped away most of her makeup. She looked up when he walked in, and for a moment they just stared at each other. Then she smiled. A real smile, not the almost smile from earlier. "You made it," she said. "Barely." Ethan slid into the booth across from her, very aware of how out of place he probably looked. "I should have changed first." "If you'd changed, I would have known you were trying too hard." She pushed a mug of coffee across the table toward him. "Black. You seem like a black coffee person." "Good guess." He wrapped his hands around the mug, letting the warmth seep into his cold fingers. "So, this is weird, right?" "Extremely weird. But also kind of perfect," Vivian finished. "Yeah." A waitress appeared, looking deeply uninterested in anything except taking their order. "What'll it be?" Vivian glanced at Ethan. "I'm getting a burger. The biggest, greasiest burger they have. I've been eating salmon and quinoa at business dinners for 3 weeks, and I'm done." "2 burgers," Ethan said, "and fries." The waitress grunted and disappeared. They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the fluorescent lights filling the space between them. Outside, rain continued to assault the windows, turning the city into a watercolor blur. "I Googled you," Vivian said finally. Ethan's eyebrows rose. "Yeah?" "Cole's Auto Repair, Georgetown District, 3-star average on Google. Most complaints about the location and the building condition." "That's fair. The building is a dump. The 5-star reviews all say you're the most honest mechanic in Seattle." "Those people are lying to make me feel better." Vivian laughed, and it was a good sound, genuine. "Do you always deflect compliments? Do you always research people before having coffee with them?" "Always." She wrapped her hands around her own mug. "It's a habit. Know your opponent before you sit down at the table." "Is that what I am? An opponent?" "I don't know what you are yet." "Fair enough." The waitress returned with 2 massive burgers and a mountain of fries. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled with small talk or performance. "So," Ethan said eventually, wiping grease from his fingers, "investment banker?" Vivian paused mid-bite. "What?" "That's what Sarah told me. You're an investment banker." "I'm not an investment banker." "Then what are you?" She set down her burger very carefully. "I run a company." "What kind of company?" "Manufacturing, industrial components, mostly. Some tech development. We operate in 17 countries and employ about 40,000 people." Ethan stared at her. "You're joking." "I don't joke about my company." "Hart Industries," he said slowly, pieces clicking into place. "You're that Vivian Hart." "Guilty." "Jesus Christ. Is that a problem?" Ethan sat back in the booth, trying to process this. Vivian Hart. He'd seen her name in the news, on business websites, probably on the side of buildings he'd driven past without paying attention. She wasn't just successful, she was stratospherically, impossibly, almost obscenely successful. And he'd made her hold an umbrella while he fixed her car in the rain. "I think I might throw up," he said. Vivian's expression shuddered immediately. "I see. No, not because—" He ran a hand through his hair. "I just fixed a billionaire's car and charged her nothing. My accountant would kill me." She relaxed slightly. "You don't have an accountant." "How do you know?" "Because you operate a 3-star repair shop in Georgetown and your truck's check engine light has been on for at least a month." 3 weeks. Even worse. They looked at each other across the table, and then they were both laughing, real, helpless laughter that made the waitress glance over with a look of deep concern. "This is insane," Ethan managed finally. "Completely insane," Vivian agreed. "You know I showed up to meet you in muddy jeans because I spent an hour fixing your car, right?" "Yes." "And you know I own a failing repair shop and I'm about 3 months away from foreclosure, right?" "I assumed something like that, yes." "And you're still sitting here." Vivian met his eyes, and her expression was suddenly serious. You fixed my car in the rain without knowing who I was, without wanting anything from me. Do you know how rare that is? Probably pretty common if you hang out with normal people. I don't hang out with normal people anymore. She picked up a fry, examined it like it held secrets. Everyone wants something, a contract, an investment, an introduction, even the people I'm supposed to trust, especially the people I'm supposed to trust. That sounds lonely. It is. She ate the fry. But it's also safe. You can't be disappointed if you never expect anything real. Ethan thought about his own life. The shop that was slowly dying, the electricity bill he couldn't pay, Sophie asking him every morning if he was okay, the weight of trying to be enough for everyone while feeling like he was failing at everything. I get that, he said quietly. Do you? My daughter asks me every day if I'm happy. She's 8 years old and she thinks it's her job to monitor my mental health. That's not fair to her, but I don't know how to stop it. Vivian's expression softened. You have a daughter. Sophie. She's with my sister tonight. Sarah set up this whole blind date thing because she thinks I need to start living again, whatever that means. And are you happy? Ethan considered the question honestly. I'm surviving. Some days that feels like the same thing. They sat with that for a moment, the diner's fluorescent lights humming overhead, rain still hammering the windows. Two people who'd stumbled into each other by accident, sitting in a grimy booth, eating burgers and telling the truth for maybe the first time in months. What happened to your wife? Vivian asked quietly. Left 3 years ago. Met someone with better prospects and fewer late-night phone calls about broken-down cars. He didn't say it with bitterness, just fact. She sends Sophie birthday cards. That's about it. I'm sorry. Don't be. We were wrong for each other from the start. I just didn't want to admit it. Vivian nodded slowly. I was engaged once, called it off 6 weeks before the wedding. What happened? He told me I'd have to choose between the company and him. She smiled, but there was no humor in it. He was very surprised when I chose the company. Was it the right choice? Some days I think so. Other days I sit in empty penthouses and wonder what I'm building this empire for. The waitress returned to refill their coffee, and they sat in silence again. Outside, a car horn blared. Someone laughed. The city continued spinning, oblivious to two people sitting in a diner at 11:30 at night, discovering that maybe they weren't as alone as they'd thought. So what now? Ethan asked finally. Vivian looked at him over the rim of her coffee mug. What do you mean? I mean, you're Vivian Hart. You run an empire. I can barely keep my repair shop open. This doesn't make sense. Since when do things have to make sense? Since always. That's how life works. That's how life works for people who are afraid to try something different. She set down her mug. I spent an hour stranded in the rain tonight. A stranger stopped to help me. He fixed my car. He didn't ask for anything. And when I tried to thank him, he disappeared. And then I found out that stranger was supposed to be my blind date. Except we both screwed it up by actually being decent people. I'm not sure decent is the word. It's exactly the word. Vivian leaned forward. Do you know how many people would have driven past me tonight, seen an expensive car, assumed I had it handled, kept going? But you stopped. You got soaking wet, you fixed a problem that wasn't yours, and you were late to your own date because of it. That's not exactly smart. No, but it's kind. And I can't remember the last time someone was kind to me without wanting something in return. Ethan felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of the tight, careful control he'd maintained for years. So what do? We finish our burgers, we have more coffee, and we stop pretending that this has to make sense. And after that, Vivian smiled, I have no idea, but I'd like to find out. They stayed until the diner closed, talking about everything and nothing. Sophie's soccer games, Vivian's last disastrous board meeting, the time Ethan's truck broke down in the middle of a highway and he had to hitchhike home, the year Vivian spent backpacking through Southeast Asia before business school. They talked until the waitress started pointedly stacking chairs, and even then they lingered, reluctant to leave the small, fluorescent-lit bubble they'd created. Finally, Vivian paid the check over Ethan's protests, and they walked out into the rain together. I should go, Ethan said, standing beside his truck. You should, but neither of them moved. This was, he searched for the right word, unexpected. Good unexpected or bad unexpected? I don't know yet. Ask me tomorrow. Vivian pulled out her phone. Give me your number, your real number, not whatever Sarah gave me. He rattled it off, and a moment later his phone buzzed with a text. This is Vivian, so you'll know it's really me. Got it, he said. They stood in the rain, neither wanting to be the first to leave, both aware that whatever this was, this strange, accidental collision of worlds, was fragile enough to break if they looked at it too hard. Text me, Vivian said finally. I will. I mean it. I know. She turned toward the Jaguar, then paused. Ethan? Yeah? Thank you for stopping, for fixing my car, for showing up tonight, even late and covered in mud. Thank you for not leaving when I didn't show up on time. I did leave, but you came back. She smiled, got in her car, and drove away. Ethan watched the Jaguar's taillights disappear into the rain, then climbed into his truck and sat there for a long moment, hands on the wheel, trying to make sense of what had just happened. His phone buzzed. Vivian, drive safe and fix that check engine light. He laughed and typed back. Yes, ma'am. The drive home took 20 minutes, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ethan Cole wasn't thinking about foreclosure notices or overdue bills or whether he was failing his daughter. He was thinking about a woman who ran an empire but ate greasy diner burgers at midnight. And he was smiling. The next morning came too early and brought Sophie with it. Ethan woke to the sound of his sister's key turning in the lock, followed by the thundering footsteps of an 8-year-old who'd apparently forgotten how to use her inside voice. Dad, wake up! Aunt Sarah said you went on a date and I want to hear everything. He groaned into his pillow, every muscle protesting. Sleeping in wet jeans on top of the covers probably wasn't his smartest move, but he'd been too tired to care when he'd stumbled in at 1 a.m. Sophie, inside voice, Sarah called from the doorway, and maybe let your dad actually wake up before the interrogation. Ethan rolled over to find his daughter standing beside the bed, still in her dinosaur pajamas, brown eyes wide with the kind of manic energy only children possessed before 8 a.m. Was she pretty? Did you kiss her? Are you getting married? Jesus, Soph. He sat up, wincing at the ache in his back. How about we start with good morning? Good morning. Now answer the questions. Sarah appeared behind Sophie, holding 2 cups of coffee like a peace offering. I tried to make her wait in the car. Clearly that worked great. Ethan took one of the mugs gratefully. What time is it? 7:30. You're welcome. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, studying him with that older sister expression that meant she was cataloging every detail for later analysis. So, how did it go? Sophie bounced on her toes. Did you like her? Ethan took a long drink of coffee, buying time. How did he explain last night to an 8-year-old? How did he explain it to himself? It was good, he said finally. Weird, but good. Weird how? Sarah pressed. She was the one I helped, the car that broke down. Sarah's eyes went wide. You're kidding. Nope. Fixed her Jaguar, rushed to the restaurant. She'd already left because I was late, and then we figured it out and met at a diner instead. That's so romantic, Sophie squealed. Like a movie. It's something. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, realizing it was probably sticking up at weird angles. She's Vivian Hart. His sister's expression went blank. I'm sorry, what? Vivian Hart. Hart Industries. The Vivian Hart. No, that's not. Catherine said she was in finance. Catherine lied. Or didn't know. Or decided billionaire CEO was too intimidating to lead with. Sarah stood up, pacing the small bedroom. Ethan, Vivian Hart is worth I don't even know. Billions. Actual billions. I'm aware. And you ate burgers with her at Rosie's diner. Seemed like the thing to do at the time. Sophie looked between them, confusion creasing her forehead. Is billions a lot? Yes, sweetheart, Sarah said. It's a lot. Does she have a castle? I didn't ask about her real estate portfolio, Soph. His daughter climbed onto the bed, settling cross-legged beside him. But did you like her? For real? Not just because she's rich. Ethan looked at his daughter, too perceptive, too aware of adult complications, too familiar with the weight of things that shouldn't concern 8-year-olds. Yeah, he said honestly. I liked her. She's different than I expected. Good different? I think so. Sophie grinned, and it was like watching the sun come out. Then you should see her again.
Maybe I will. No, maybe. You definitely should. She poked him in the arm. You smiled when you said her name. Did not. Did too. You got all smiley and weird. Sarah laughed. She's right. You do look smiley and weird. I hate both of you. No, you don't. Sophie hugged him fiercely, her small arms wrapped around his neck. I'm glad you went on the date, even if you got all muddy. He hugged her back, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo and the lingering scent of Sarah's house. Me too, kiddo. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. All three of them looked at it. Is it her? Sophie whispered, like the phone could hear them. Ethan picked it up, and his stomach did something complicated when he saw Vivian's name. What does it say? Sarah demanded. He opened the message. Good morning. I'm assuming you survived the drive home without the truck dying. Should I be worried? She's asking about the truck, he said. Sophie peered over his shoulder. That's boring. Tell her you had fun. I'm not taking dating advice from an 8-year-old. Why not? I'm smart. Sarah grabbed the phone from his hands, ignoring his protest. Let me see. Okay, this is good. She's initiating contact. She's being playful, but not too eager. Can I have my phone back? In a minute. I'm analyzing. She typed something, and Ethan lunged for the phone. Sarah, what are you... Relax. I just said the truck is fine and you had a good time. See? Professional and friendly. I could have written that myself. Yes, but you would have overthought it for 20 minutes first. She handed the phone back. You're welcome. The response came almost immediately. Good. I'd hate for my handiwork to be wasted. Are you working today? Sophie read over his shoulder again. What's handiwork mean? She fixed the truck yesterday, Ethan explained, then caught Sarah's raised eyebrow. Long story. I'll tell you later. He typed back, Shop's open 9 to 5. Why? Just curious. I like to know where my mechanics spend their time. Sarah made a strangled noise. She's flirting with you. She's not. She absolutely is. My mechanics. That's possessive flirting. You're reading too much into it. And you're not reading enough. Sarah grabbed Sophie's hand. Come on, Soph. Let's make breakfast and let your dad figure out how to text like a grown-up. But I want to help. You can help by making sure the pancakes don't burn. They left him alone in the bedroom, and Ethan stared at his phone for a long moment. The conversation sat there, innocent enough, but Sarah was right. There was something underneath it, a current he wasn't sure how to navigate. He typed, You can visit if you want. Fair warning. The shop is not billionaire approved. I've seen worse. Doubtful. Try me. He smiled despite himself, then caught his reflection in the mirror across the room. Sarah was right. He did look weird when he smiled. Door's open if you're serious. I'll think about it. Ethan set the phone down and headed for the shower. The hot water felt like a small miracle, washing away the dried mud and the ache in his muscles. By the time he emerged, Sophie and Sarah had destroyed the kitchen in the name of pancakes. You used every bowl, he observed. Cooking is messy, Sophie informed him, as if this was breaking news. Aunt Sarah let me crack the eggs. The evidence of that decision was splattered across the counter, but Sarah just shrugged. She's learning. They ate breakfast together at the tiny kitchen table, Sophie chattering about a school project on dinosaurs, while Sarah occasionally interjected with questions about Vivian that Ethan deflected as smoothly as possible. When they finished, Sarah started gathering her things. I've got to get to work. Sophie, you want to stay with your dad today? Yes, Sophie bounced up. Can I come to the shop? Ethan hesitated. Saturdays were usually slow, and having Sophie around meant he'd spend more time supervising than actually working. But the hope in her eyes made the decision easy. Sure, but you have to stay in the office and do your homework first. Deal. They drove to the shop in comfortable silence, Sophie humming along to the radio while Ethan navigated the Saturday morning traffic. Georgetown looked different in daylight. Less industrial, more working-class neighborhood trying to hold on to its identity against the encroaching tide of tech money and gentrification. Cole's Auto Repair sat between a Vietnamese restaurant and a furniture warehouse that had been closed for 3 years. The building was exactly as the Google reviews had described, small, cramped, desperately in need of a paint job. But it was his, at least for another few months.
He unlocked the gate and raised the bay doors, letting morning light flood the workspace. The shop smelled like oil and metal and years of accumulated automotive history. Sophie immediately claimed the office, a glass-walled box with a desk, a computer from 2012, and a filing system that could generously be called chaotic. "I'm doing homework," she announced, pulling out a math workbook. "I can see that." Ethan flipped on the lights, checked the schedule. One oil change at 10, a brake job at noon, and a diagnostic on a Subaru that had been making a noise the owner couldn't describe beyond bad. He was elbow deep in the oil change when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, assuming it was another creditor, but something made him wipe his hands on a rag and pick up. "Cole's Auto." "Mr. Cole? This is Patricia Morrison from First National Bank." His stomach dropped. "Yeah, hi. I'm calling about your business loan. We haven't received this month's payment, and according to our records, you're now 60 days past due." Ethan glanced toward the office, where Sophie was bent over her homework. He stepped outside into the small parking lot, pulling the door mostly closed. "I know. I'm working on it. I understand that business can be unpredictable, but we need to discuss your options. If you're unable to make the payment, I'll make the payment." "When?" "Soon. I have some jobs coming in next week, and Mr. Cole." Patricia's voice was kind but firm, which somehow made it worse. "We've had this conversation before. The bank can't continue extending indefinitely. If you can't make a payment by the end of the month, we'll have to begin foreclosure proceedings." The words hit like a physical blow, even though he'd known they were coming. End of the month, 3 weeks. "I understand," he managed. "Is there family who might be able to help? A loan from a relative?" He thought about Sarah, barely making ends meet herself with 2 kids and a teacher's salary. "No." "Then I strongly suggest you speak with a financial advisor. There are options for businesses in your situation. I'll figure it out. Thank you for calling." He hung up before she could say anything else and stood in the parking lot, staring at the cracked asphalt, trying to breathe through the tightness in his chest. 3 weeks. The oil change customer arrived right on time, which meant Ethan had to shove the panic down and act like everything was fine. He finished the job, took payment in cash, and added it to the envelope in his desk drawer where he kept the running tally of how far behind he was. Not nearly far enough. Sophie appeared in the doorway as the customer drove away. "Dad? You okay?" "Yeah, kiddo, just thinking." "About what?" "Boring adult stuff." She studied him with those 2 knowing eyes. "Was it a bad phone call?" "It was fine." "You're lying." "Sophie, you get this look. When you're worried about money, your face goes all tight and you stop smiling." She crossed her arms, looking way too much like her aunt. "I'm not a baby. I know things are hard." Ethan pulled her into a hug, feeling the familiar weight of failure press down on his shoulders. "Things are fine, I promise." "You're lying again." "Yeah, I am." They stood there in the doorway of the shop, and Ethan wondered when his daughter had gotten old enough to see through him so easily, when she'd stopped believing that parents had all the answers. The Jaguar pulled into the parking lot at 11:30. Ethan was under the Subaru, tracing a mysterious rattle that seemed to move every time he got close, when he heard the distinctive purr of the British engine. He rolled out from under the car, grabbed a rag to wipe his hands, and there she was. Vivian Hart, stepping out of her vintage car like she was arriving at a charity gala instead of a rundown repair shop in Georgetown. She wore jeans today, actual jeans, and a simple white shirt, but she still looked like money. It was in the way she moved, the way she carried herself. Sophie appeared from the office like she'd been shot from a cannon. "Is that her? Is that the date lady?" "Sophie?" "Hi, I'm Sophie. Are you my dad's girlfriend?" Vivian's expression flickered through several emotions before landing on amused. "I'm Vivian, and we'll have to see about the girlfriend part." "That means yes," Sophie informed her father. "That means nothing." Ethan shot his daughter a look that she completely ignored. "Sorry, she's 8 and has no filter." "I have a filter. I just choose not to use it." Vivian laughed, and the sound was different than it had been at the diner, lighter. "I like her already." "You say that now." Ethan gestured toward the shop. "You actually came." "I said I would think about it. I thought about it. Here I am." She walked into the bay, and he watched her take in the cramped space, the ancient equipment, the oil stains that had probably been there since the 70s. To her credit, her expression didn't change. "It's small," she said. "That's a generous word for it. But it's yours. For now." Something shifted in her expression. "What does that mean?" Ethan glanced at Sophie, who was pretending not to listen while very obviously listening. "Nothing. Just business stuff." "Dad's shop is closing," Sophie said matter-of-factly. "The bank is taking it." "Sophie! What?" "It's true. I heard you on the phone." Vivian looked between them, and Ethan felt heat crawl up his neck. This was not the impression he'd wanted to make. Desperate mechanic, failing business, eavesdropping daughter. "It's not closing," he said firmly. "We're just having a rough month." "3 rough months," Sophie corrected. "I count the envelopes on your desk. Why do you— Never mind. Go back to your homework." "But— Homework. Now." Sophie huffed dramatically, but retreated to the office, though she kept glancing through the glass with obvious interest. Ethan turned back to Vivian, who was still standing in the middle of the bay, looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Sorry," he said. "She's going through a phase where she thinks being brutally honest is a personality trait." "She's not wrong, though, is she?" "About which part?" "The bank, the foreclosure." He could lie. Should lie, probably. But what was the point? 60 days past due, he admitted. They want payment by end of month or they start proceedings. "How much do you need?" That's not why I told you." "I didn't say it was. I asked how much you need." Ethan shook his head. "Vivian, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not taking money from someone I just met. It wouldn't be a gift. It would be a loan or an investment. In a 3-star auto shop in Georgetown, that's a terrible investment. Let me worry about my portfolio." She walked closer, and he caught that same expensive perfume from last night. "How much, Ethan?" $15,000 to catch up and buy some breathing room." She didn't even blink. "That's nothing." "It's everything to me." "I know." Her voice was soft. "That's why I'm offering." Pride and desperation warred in his chest. Pride was winning, but barely. "I can't. If I take your money and the shop still fails, then we'll deal with it then." Vivian pulled out her phone. "What's your bank account number?" "No." "Ethan, no." He said it firmly enough that she stopped. "I don't want your money. I want to earn my way out of this." "That's admirable and stupid." "Yeah, well, I'm good at both." They stood there in the shop, the Subaru between them, and he could feel Sophie watching from the office. The rattle he'd been chasing seemed to have vanished, like even the car was holding its breath. "Fine," Vivian said finally. "No money. But let me ask you something. How many bays does this shop have?" "2. "And how many mechanics?" "Just me. I had a guy, but I couldn't afford to keep him." "So you're doing everything yourself? Oil changes, brake jobs, diagnostics, everything." "That's how it works when you can't pay staff." She walked around the Subaru, examining the space with the same calculating look he'd seen corporate types use when they were deciding whether to buy or demolish. "What if you had more work than you could handle? Would that help?" "Sure, if I had 8 more hours in the day and didn't need sleep." "What if the work paid enough to hire someone? To actually expand?" Ethan wiped his hands on the rag again, a nervous habit. "Where are you going with this?" "Hart Industries has a fleet, about 200 vehicles across our Seattle operations. Trucks, vans, company cars. We have a contract with a shop in Bellevue, but they're overpriced and the work is mediocre." His heart started beating faster. "Vivian, I could move that contract here. Regular maintenance, repairs, emergency service. It's steady work, guaranteed payment, enough to keep you busy and pay your bills." It was everything he needed. Everything he'd been praying for during the sleepless nights when the electricity bill sat unpaid, and Sophie asked if they were going to be okay. It was also charity dressed up as business. "That's a conflict of interest," he said. "How?" "You're offering me work because we went on a date, because you feel bad for me." "I'm offering you work because you fixed my Jaguar in the rain with nothing but a flashlight in your hands. Because every review of this shop says you're honest, even when it costs you money. Because I need a mechanic I can trust, and apparently those are rare." She crossed her arms. "The fact that I also enjoyed eating burgers with you at midnight is completely separate." "Vivian, it's a business decision, Ethan. I'm very good at those." Sophie appeared in the doorway again. Take it, Dad. Sophie, this is an adult conversation. Take it. She's trying to help and you're being stubborn because you're proud. Go back to your homework. Fine, but you're being dumb. She disappeared again, and Ethan heard the office chair squeak as she threw herself into it. Vivian was smiling. I really do like her. She's a menace. She's smart. And she's right. You're being stubborn. I'm being careful. There's a difference. Careful about what? He gestured between them. This. Whatever this is, we just met. We don't know each other, and you're offering me a contract that could save my business. It's not clean. Nothing worth doing is clean. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her eyes. I'm not offering this because I pity you. I'm offering it because I need someone who won't bullshit me about repairs or pad the bills or treat me like an ATM with legs. You fixed my car for free. You showed up late to a date because you were helping a stranger. That tells me more about your character than any Yelp review. And if this thing between us doesn't work out, if we try dating and it crashes and burns, then we have a professional relationship and I still get my cars fixed. Adults can handle that. Can they? I don't know, but I'm willing to try if you are. Ethan looked around the shop, at the equipment he'd bought secondhand, the tools he'd collected over 15 years, the dreams of expansion that had slowly contracted into just trying to survive. Then he looked at Sophie through the office window, bent over her homework, trying to pretend she wasn't listening to every word. If I say yes, he said slowly, it's because it's a good business decision, not because we're dating. We're dating? I thought, weren't we? Vivian smiled. I mean, I was hoping, but you haven't actually asked. I'm asking. That's not asking, that's stating. He laughed despite himself. Fine. Vivian Hart, would you like to go on an actual planned date with me? One where I show up on time and not covered in mud. I don't know. The mud was charming. Vivian. Yes, I would like that. Okay then. Okay. They stood there grinning at each other like teenagers until Sophie's voice cut through the moment. Does this mean you're taking the job? Ethan sighed. Yes, Soph, I'm taking the job. Finally, you were being so dumb about it. Love you too, kiddo. Vivian pulled out her phone again. I'll have my fleet manager contact you next week. He'll go over the details, schedule, pricing, expectations. What if your fleet manager doesn't like the idea of working with a Georgetown shop? Then he'll deal with it or find a new job. I'm the CEO. That's how it works. Must be nice. It has its perks. She glanced at her watch. I should go. I have a meeting at 2. On a Saturday? International markets don't care about weekends. She started walking toward the Jaguar, and Ethan followed her outside. Sophie had her face pressed against the office window, watching everything. Thank you, he said, for the contract, for coming here, for not running screaming when my daughter announced my financial problems to the world. Your daughter is delightful, and you're welcome. Vivian opened the car door, then paused. That date? When were you thinking? Tomorrow? If you're free? I'm free. Where? Somewhere without a dress code. I'm thinking we've established that fancy restaurants aren't our thing. She laughed. Deal. Text me the details. I will. But she didn't get in the car yet. Instead, she stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume mixing with the oil and metal scent that clung to his clothes. For a second, he thought she might kiss him, but instead she just squeezed his hand. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I'm glad you stopped that night, even if it made you late. Me too. She got in the Jaguar, and he watched her drive away, the engine purring perfectly thanks to his 5-minute fix on a rainy roadside. When he turned back to the shop, Sophie was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, wearing the most self-satisfied expression he'd ever seen. Don't say it, he warned. I told you to take the job. I know. And I was right. I know. And you like her. Sophie, you do. You were all smiley again, and you held her hand. She held my hand. Same thing. Sophie grabbed his arm, pulling him back toward the shop. So where are you taking her tomorrow? I haven't decided yet. Take her somewhere fun, not boring adult stuff. Like where? I don't know. The aquarium? Pike Place? Ooh, you could take her to that place with the mini golf and the arcade. I'm not taking a billionaire to an arcade. Why not? She liked the diner. That was actually a good point. Vivian had seemed more relaxed eating greasy burgers than she probably ever was at those expensive restaurants where people close deals over salmon and quinoa. I'll think about it, he said. Think yes. The rest of the day passed in a blur of work and planning. The brake job turned into a brake job plus rotors. The Subaru's rattle revealed itself as a heat shield, and Sophie somehow managed to finish her homework and reorganize his entire filing system in the process. You had invoices from 2019 mixed with the current stuff, she informed him. I made folders. You didn't have to do that. Someone had to. Your system was chaos. My system was fine. Your system was finding things by memory and hoping. She had him there. They locked up at 6, drove home through Saturday evening traffic, and ordered pizza because neither of them had the energy to cook. Sophie fell asleep on the couch, halfway through a nature documentary about penguins, and Ethan carried her to bed before collapsing on the couch himself. His phone buzzed. Vivian, how did the rest of your day go? He smiled and typed back, good. Sophie reorganized my office. She's productive. She's terrifying. Pretty sure she's going to be running her own company by age 12. I'd invest in that. They texted back and forth for an hour, the conversation flowing easier than it should have between two people who'd known each other for less than 48 hours. She told him about her meeting, some acquisition in Singapore that was giving her legal team fits. He told her about the Subaru's rattle and how satisfying it was to finally track down the problem. Normal stuff. Easy stuff. Until she asked, what made you become a mechanic? He stared at the question for a long moment before answering. My dad. He had a shop when I was growing up. Smaller than mine, if you can believe that. He taught me everything. How to listen to an engine, how to diagnose problems, how to tell when someone was trying to bullshit you. He died when I was 17. Heart attack in the shop. I found him under a Chevy Impala. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before her response came through. I'm so sorry. It was a long time ago. That doesn't make it easier. No, it doesn't. Another pause, then. My father died when I was 19. Cancer. He built Hart Industries from nothing, and I watched him work himself to death trying to make it bigger. Sometimes I wonder if the company was worth it. Ethan read the message twice, understanding the weight of what she'd just shared. Is that why you took over? To finish what he started? Maybe. Or maybe I was too scared to imagine doing anything else. That's honest. You're easy to be honest with. He didn't know what to say to that, so he just sent back, same. They texted until midnight, the conversation wandering through childhood memories and bad jobs, and the strange moments that had led them both to where they were. When Vivian finally said goodnight, Ethan sat in the dark living room and realized something that should have terrified him, but didn't. He was falling for her. Fast, messy, completely impractical, but real. His phone buzzed one more time. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Wear something you don't mind getting wet. He typed back, what are we doing? It's a surprise, trust me. Should I be worried? Probably. But do it anyway. He laughed and sent back a thumbs up, then headed to bed with his mind already racing through possibilities. The aquarium, maybe, or a harbor cruise. Something that involved water and wouldn't require him to pretend he knew anything about fine dining. Whatever it was, he'd figure it out. He was good at figuring things out, even when they didn't make sense. Sunday morning arrived with Sophie jumping on his bed at 7:30, which was apparently her new favorite way to wake him up. Dad, you have a date today. What are you wearing? Where are you going? Can I help you pick your shirt? Ethan groaned and pulled the pillow over his face. Sophie, it's 7:30. The date isn't until 2. That's only 6.5 hours. You need to plan. I need to sleep. She yanked the pillow away. No sleeping, planning, get up. There was no winning this argument, so Ethan dragged himself out of bed and stumbled toward the kitchen. Sophie followed, already rattling off suggestions like she'd been thinking about this all night. You should wear the blue shirt, not the one with the stain, the other blue one. And your good jeans, not the work ones. And you need to shower first because you still smell like the shop. Thanks for that. Just being honest. She climbed onto a kitchen chair, watching him make coffee with the intensity of a football coach reviewing game footage. Are you nervous? Should I be? Probably. She's really pretty and really rich. That's intimidating. When did you become an expert on dating? I watch a lot of TV when Aunt Sarah thinks I'm doing homework. Ethan poured himself coffee and leaned against the counter. Soph, I need you to understand something. This thing with Vivian, it might not work out. Why not? Because we're really different. She runs $1 billion company. I fix cars. She lives in a world I don't understand, and I live in a world she's probably never even thought about. Sophie crossed her arms, looking way too much like her aunt again. So? So it's complicated. Love is always complicated. That's what they say on TV. This isn't TV, kiddo. But you like her, and she likes you. I could tell when she came to the shop. She looked at you the same way you look at broken cars. Ethan blinked. I'm not sure that's a compliment. It is. You look at broken cars like you want to fix them, like you care about making them better. Sophie hopped down from the chair and hugged him around the waist. She looked at you like she wants to know how you work. That's good. He hugged her back, wondering when his daughter had gotten so wise about things she shouldn't have to think about yet. When did you grow up? I've always been this smart. You just didn't notice. The morning passed too slowly and too fast at the same time. Ethan showered, shaved, agonized over the blue shirt versus the gray one, then changed back to the blue because Sophie was right about most things. He checked his phone every 5 minutes, even though Vivian hadn't texted since last night. At 1:30, Sarah showed up to take Sophie for the afternoon. Aunt Sarah! Sophie ran to the door. Dad's going on a date and he's super nervous. I'm not nervous, Ethan lied. You changed your shirt 3 times, Sophie informed Sarah, and you keep checking your phone. Sarah grinned. That's nervous. I hate both of you. No, you don't. Sarah pulled him aside while Sophie gathered her things. Seriously, though, how are you feeling about this? Terrified. Good. That means you care. What if I screw it up? What if I'm boring or awkward or she realizes I don't belong in her world? Then you'll deal with it. But Ethan? Sarah squeezed his arm. Stop assuming you're not good enough. You're kind, you're honest, you're a great dad. That's worth more than money. Tell that to my bank account. I'm serious. She obviously sees something in you, or she wouldn't have shown up at your shop yesterday. Don't sabotage this before it even starts. He nodded, trying to believe it. Sophie hugged him on her way out. Be yourself. Unless you can be funny, then be funny. Great advice, Soph. You're welcome. Now go pick her up and don't be late. They left, and Ethan stood in his empty apartment, staring at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. The blue shirt was fine. The jeans were clean. His boots were the same ones he always wore because they were the only ones he owned that weren't steel-toed work boots. This would have to do. His phone buzzed at 1:55. Vivian. I'm outside. He grabbed his wallet and keys, locked the apartment, and headed downstairs. The Jaguar was parked at the curb, engine purring, and Vivian was leaning against the driver's door wearing jeans and a leather jacket that probably cost more than his truck. You're early, he said. I'm punctual. There's a difference. She looked him over, and he caught the hint of a smile. You clean up nice. You said to wear something I don't mind getting wet, so I figured this was safe. Whoa. Smart. She tossed him the keys, and he caught them reflexively. You're driving. What? No. This is your car. And I want to see if you can drive it without breaking down on the side of the road. She walked around to the passenger side. Come on, don't be scared. I'm not scared. I'm appropriately cautious about driving a vintage car worth more than my annual income. It's insured, and I trust you. That hit harder than it should have. Ethan slid into the driver's seat, adjusted the mirrors, and tested the clutch. The car responded like a dream, smooth, responsive, perfectly balanced. Okay, he admitted, this is amazing. I know. Now drive before I change my mind. He pulled away from the curb, getting a feel for the car's rhythm. It handled differently than his truck, lighter, more precise, every input translated directly into motion. Where am I going? He asked. Take I-5 north, I'll tell you when to exit. They drove in comfortable silence, the engine humming beneath them, Seattle's skyline sliding past on their left. Ethan kept waiting for the awkwardness to set in, for the conversation to dry up, but it never did. Vivian navigated from the passenger seat, occasionally pointing out landmarks or telling him stories about board meetings gone wrong. So there I am, she said, presenting our 5-year expansion plan, and the VP of Operations stands up and says, "With all due respect, Ms. Hart, this is exactly the kind of aggressive growth that killed your father." Ethan winced. "Jesus, what did you do?" I asked him if he'd like to tender his resignation right there or wait until after the meeting. He chose right there. She shrugged. "Respect is earned, and he hadn't earned it." "Remind me never to piss you off." Smart man. They exited near Everett, following Vivian's directions down increasingly rural roads until they pulled into a small marina. Boats bobbed in their slips, and the smell of salt water mixed with diesel fuel. Ethan killed the engine and looked around. "We're going on a boat?" "Kayaks, actually." Vivian pointed to a rental shack at the end of the dock. I called ahead. "They're expecting us." "You want to go kayaking?" "I want to go kayaking. You said you wanted something without a dress code. This is definitely that." He followed her to the rental shack, where a teenager with sunburned skin handed them life jackets and paddles. 20 minutes later, they were on the water, Vivian in the front of a tandem kayak and Ethan in the back, trying to remember the last time he'd been in a boat. "You've done this before, right?" Vivian called over her shoulder. "Not since I was like 15, summer camp." "Great, so we're probably going to capsize." Very motivating. But they found a rhythm quickly, their paddles cutting through the water in sync. The marina gave way to open water, and Everett's shoreline stretched out to their left while mountains rose in the distance. "This was a good idea," Ethan admitted. "I have them occasionally." Vivian paused her paddling, letting them drift. "I needed this. Something that wasn't a board meeting or a quarterly report or someone asking me to approve a budget." "How often do you do normal stuff like this?" "Define normal." "Like, kayaking. Going to diners, eating food that costs less than $50. She laughed, but it sounded sad. "Almost never. My schedule is usually meetings at 7 a.m., conference calls through lunch, dinner with investors or clients. By the time I get home, I'm too tired to do anything except review documents and go to bed." "That sounds awful." "It's effective. It's lonely." Vivian stopped paddling completely and turned to look at him. "Yeah, it is." They floated in silence for a moment, the kayak rocking gently with the waves. A seagull cried overhead, and somewhere in the distance, a motorboat engine rumbled to life. "Why'd you agree to the blind date?" Ethan asked. "If your schedule's that insane, why bother?" "Catherine wore me down, my assistant. She's been on a mission to fix my personal life for months." Vivian trailed her fingers in the water. "And honestly, I was curious, wondering if there was anyone out there who'd look at me and see a person instead of a business opportunity." "Did you find one?" She smiled. "Yeah, I did. He fixed my car in the rain and refused to take payment. Then he showed up to a fancy restaurant covered in mud because he was helping me and didn't know it. That guy sounds like an idiot." "He's kind of perfect." Ethan's chest tightened. "Vivian, I know, it's fast, we barely know each other, but I can't remember the last time I felt this normal, like I could just be myself without calculating every word." "You can be yourself with me, always." "Even when myself is kind of a controlling workaholic who probably needs therapy?" "Even then, as long as you can handle that I'm a broke mechanic who has panic attacks about bank statements." "Deal." They started paddling again, following the shoreline north. Vivian told him about growing up as the daughter of a self-made millionaire, the pressure to be perfect. The moment she'd realized her father was dying and everything he'd built would fall on her shoulders. Ethan told her about finding his dad under that Impala, about marrying Laura because it seemed like the next logical step, about the moment Sophie was born and he'd understood that nothing else in his life would ever matter as much. They capsized once when Vivian tried to take a selfie and leaned too far. The water was cold enough to make them both yelp, and they swam the kayak back to shore laughing like teenagers. "Your jacket's ruined," Ethan said, wringing water from his shirt. "It's just a jacket." Vivian shook her hair out, water droplets catching the sunlight. "I have 12 more." "Of course you do." They returned the kayak and drove back to Seattle as the sun started its descent toward the Olympics. Ethan's hands were confident on the wheel now, the Jaguar responding to his touch like they'd been driving together for years. "I'm starving," Vivian said. "Please tell me you know somewhere good." "Define good." "Food that won't give me food poisoning and atmosphere that doesn't involve white tablecloths." "I know a place." He took her to a Thai restaurant in Ballard, the kind of spot where the menu was in both English and Thai, and the owner's grandmother was usually yelling at someone in the kitchen. They sat at a wobbly table near the window and ordered too much food. "This is perfect," Vivian said around a mouthful of pad thai. "Why do rich people insist on making everything complicated? This is what food should be." "You're preaching to the choir." They ate until they couldn't move, splitting a mango sticky rice for dessert that Vivian declared better than anything she'd had at Michelin-starred restaurants. The sun was setting by the time they left, painting Seattle's streets in gold and orange. Ethan drove them back toward his neighborhood, feeling the day winding down and not wanting it to end. When he pulled up outside his building, Vivian made no move to switch seats. "So," she said. "So, this was a good second date." Technically third. The diner was the second. "Fair point." She unbuckled her seatbelt and turned to face him. "I had fun. Actual fun. Not business dinner pretending to have fun." "Me too. Even the capsizing part. Especially the capsizing part." She reached over and took his hand, her fingers still slightly cold from the water. "I want to keep doing this, whatever this is. Even though I'm broke and have a kid, and my life is basically held together with duct tape and hope. Even though, maybe because of it." She squeezed his hand. "You're real, Ethan. Everything in my world is carefully managed and strategically planned. You're just real." He should say something smooth, something romantic. Instead, what came out was, "I really want to kiss you right now." Vivian laughed. "So do it." He did. It was awkward at first. The car was cramped, the gear shift was in the way, and they bumped noses once before getting the angle right. But then it wasn't awkward at all. It was warm and real and tasted like mango and possibility. When they finally pulled apart, Vivian was smiling. "Okay, that was worth waiting for." "Yeah?" "Definitely, yeah." They sat there for a moment, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. Then Vivian's phone rang, shattering the moment. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and sighed. "I have to take this. It's Singapore." "At 8 p.m. on a Sunday?" "International markets don't care about weekends, remember?" She answered the call. "This is Vivian Hart." Her expression shifted immediately. All business, sharp and focused. She listened for a moment, then said something in what sounded like Mandarin. Ethan couldn't understand the words, but he could hear the authority in her tone. She hung up a minute later, looking tired. "I'm sorry, the acquisition I told you about, there's a problem with the contracts. I need to get home and get on a video call." "No worries. I'll grab an Uber back to my truck." "Don't be ridiculous. I'll drive you." She slid into the driver's seat and Ethan moved to the passenger side. "But I might need to drop you off and run." "Totally fine. Go save your empire." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Some empire. Can't even make it through a Sunday without a crisis." They drove in silence, the easy comfort from earlier replaced by something heavier. When she pulled up next to his truck in the marina parking lot, Vivian kept the engine running. "Thank you for today," she said. "I mean it. I needed this." "Me too." He unbuckled his seatbelt, hesitating. "Can I see you again? Like, soon?" "How about Wednesday? There's an event I have to go to, corporate fundraiser thing. It'll be boring and full of people I can't stand, but maybe it'll be better if you're there." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Is this a black tie thing?" "Unfortunately, but you don't have to wear a tux. A suit is fine." "Vivian, I don't own a suit." She blinked. "Oh, right. Well, we can—" "I'm not showing up to your corporate event in khakis and a button-down. That's not fair to you." "I don't care what you wear. But everyone else will. They'll look at me and see exactly what I am, someone who doesn't belong." "Ethan, I should go. You've got your call." He opened the door, suddenly desperate to be out of the car. "Thanks for today. It was great." "Wait." But he was already out, closing the door before she could finish. He got in his truck and started the engine, not looking back as the Jaguar sat idling in the parking lot. By the time he pulled onto the road, she was gone. His phone buzzed before he made it home. "Vivian, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have assumed you'd be comfortable with that kind of event." He stared at the message for a long moment before responding. "It's not your fault. I just don't want to embarrass you. You couldn't.
You don't know that. I do, but I understand if it's too much. He didn't respond. What could he say? That he was terrified of walking into a room full of wealthy people who'd take one look at his Goodwill suit and know exactly where he belonged? That the thought of being Vivian's charity case made him want to punch something? When he got home, Sarah was waiting with Sophie on his couch. How was it? His sister asked, then caught his expression. What happened? Nothing. It was fine. Dad kissed her, Sophie announced. I can tell because you have that look. What look? The I kissed someone look. Your face is all weird. Sarah studied him. Sophie, go play in your dad's room for a minute. But now, please. Sophie huffed, but obeyed, and Sarah waited until the bedroom door closed before turning back to Ethan. What actually happened? He sank onto the couch. She invited me to some corporate fundraiser. Black tie. I told her I don't own a suit, and she said it was fine, but it's not fine. I don't belong in that world, Sarah. So rent a suit. That's not the point. Then what is the point? The point is, he ran his hands through his hair. She lives in penthouses and flies to Singapore for business meetings. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment and get panic attacks about electricity bills. We went kayaking today, and it was perfect, but that's not real life. Real life is her needing to take calls at 8 p.m. on Sunday while I'm trying to figure out how to keep my shop open. Sarah sat beside him. You're scared. Of course I'm scared. What happens when she realizes I'm not some diamond in the rough? I'm just rough. Have you considered that maybe she already knows that and doesn't care? She should care, for her own sake. That's not your decision to make. Sarah poked him in the chest. You're self-sabotaging. You had a good time, she clearly likes you, and now you're inventing reasons why it won't work. I'm being realistic. You're being a coward. The words stung because they were true. Ethan closed his eyes, thinking about Vivian's hand in his, the way she'd laughed when they capsized, the kiss in the car that had made everything else disappear. What if I screw it up? He asked quietly. Then you screw it up. But at least you tried. Sarah stood. I'm taking Sophie home. You're going to sit here and think about whether you want to let fear win or whether you want to actually be happy for once. That's harsh. You need harsh. She called Sophie, who emerged from the bedroom with suspiciously perfect timing. Are you and Vivian fighting? Sophie asked. No, sweetheart. We're just figuring things out. Figuring things out is what adults say when they're definitely fighting. She hugged him. Fix it, Dad. She's nice and she makes you smile. Don't mess it up. They left and Ethan sat alone in his apartment, staring at his phone. 3 unread messages from Vivian. I really am sorry. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. We don't have to go to the fundraiser. We can do something else. Please talk to me. He should respond, should say something to fix the weird tension he'd created by bolting from her car. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he opened his laptop and Googled Men's Suit Rental Seattle. The results were depressing. Prices ranging from $100 to $300 for a single night. Money he didn't have. Money he'd need for the shop payment at the end of the month. His phone rang. Unknown number again. Hello? Mr. Cole, this is James Morrison from Hart Industries Fleet Management. Ethan sat up straighter. Oh, hi. Yes. Ms. Hart asked me to reach out about a maintenance contract for our Seattle vehicles. Do you have time this week to discuss terms? Yeah, definitely, when works for you. How about Tuesday morning? I can come by your shop, 9 a.m.? That's perfect, thank you. No, thank you. Ms. Hart speaks very highly of your work. We're looking forward to partnering with you. They hung up, and Ethan stared at his phone. She'd followed through. Even after he'd been weird and awkward about the fundraiser, even after he'd practically run away from her car, she'd still made sure her fleet manager contacted him. He pulled up her messages and started typing. I'm sorry for being weird about the fundraiser. You didn't do anything wrong. I just got in my head about not fitting into your world. The response came almost immediately. You don't have to fit into my world. I like you in your world. But your world is part of who you are. I can't just ignore that. So come to the fundraiser. Wear whatever you want. I'll be there, and that's all that matters. I don't have a suit. Then we'll get you one. Vivian, I'm not buying it for you. We'll go shopping together. You can pick what you like, and I'll loan you the money. You can pay me back whenever.
That's still charity. It's a loan. There's a difference. Please, Ethan, I want you there. He sat with that for a long moment, pride and want battling in his chest. Finally, he typed, "Okay, but I'm paying you back. I know you will. Tuesday after your fleet meeting? Deal. Good. Now get some sleep." And Ethan? Yeah? Today was my favorite day in a very long time. He smiled despite himself. Mine too. That night, lying in bed, Ethan thought about his daughter's words. Don't mess it up. Simple advice from an 8-year-old who somehow understood more about relationships than he did. He wouldn't mess it up, or at least he'd try not to. Tuesday morning arrived cold and gray, typical Seattle weather that threatened rain without actually delivering. Ethan opened the shop at 8:30, giving himself time to make sure everything looked as professional as possible before James Morrison arrived. He'd swept the floors, organized the tools, even cleaned the office windows. It still looked like a struggling repair shop in Georgetown, but at least it was a clean, struggling repair shop. Morrison showed up exactly at 9, driving a Hart Industries fleet van that had definitely seen better days. He was in his 50s, heavy set, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent decades managing logistics. "Mr. Cole," he shook Ethan's hand firmly. "James Morrison. Thanks for meeting with me. Call me Ethan, and thanks for coming out." They walked through the shop, Morrison asking questions about capacity, turnaround times, parts sourcing. Ethan answered honestly. He could handle maybe 15 vehicles a week if he stayed on top of scheduling, more if he hired help. "Ms. Hart mentioned you work alone," Morrison said. "For now, I had to let my last guy go a few months back. This contract would change that. We're looking at regular maintenance on about 50 vehicles a month, plus emergency repairs as needed. You'd need at least one other mechanic, maybe 2. Ethan's heart rate kicked up. "That's a lot of work." "It's steady work, guaranteed payment, 30-day terms. We're not the fastest payers in the world, but we always pay." They discussed rates, scheduling, expectations. Morrison was straightforward and fair, treating Ethan like a professional instead of someone to be managed. By the time they finished, Ethan had a preliminary contract in hand and a start date of next Monday. "Welcome to the Hart Industries family," Morrison said, shaking his hand again. "And between you and me, Ms. Hart doesn't usually get personally involved in vendor selection. Whatever you did to impress her, keep doing it." Ethan felt heat crawl up his neck. "We're friends." Morrison smiled knowingly. "Sure you are. See you Monday, Ethan." After he left, Ethan sat in his office and stared at the contract. 50 vehicles a month, steady work, enough income to catch up on his loan, hire help, maybe even start thinking about expansion. All because Vivian Hart had broken down on a dark road and he'd stopped to help. His phone buzzed. "Vivian, how did it go?" "Good, really good. Morrison seems solid." "He is. Been with the company 15 years. If he likes you, you're set." "Thank you. For this. For everything." "Stop thanking me. You earned this. Still, thank you." A pause, then, "Are we still on for this afternoon? Suit shopping?" Ethan looked at the contract again, at the payment schedule that would actually let him afford things. "Yeah. Where should I meet you?" "Nordstrom downtown, 2 p.m. "And Ethan?" "Yeah? Don't overthink it. It's just a suit." But it wasn't just a suit, and they both knew it. It was him stepping into her world, trying to be someone who could stand beside her without looking like he'd wandered in from the street. It was terrifying and necessary, and he was definitely overthinking it. He showed up at Nordstrom at 1:55, feeling immediately out of place among the polished shoppers and designer displays. Vivian was waiting near the men's section, wearing a business suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent. "You came," she said, smiling. "I said I would." "I know, but I wasn't sure if you'd bolt again." "I don't bolt." "You literally ran away from my car on Sunday." "That was a strategic retreat." She laughed and linked her arm through his. "Come on, let's find you something that doesn't make you want to bolt strategically." The next hour was surprisingly painless. Vivian had pulled a personal shopper, a guy named Marcus who had an eye for fit and zero patience for Ethan's self-deprecating comments. "Stop saying you look ridiculous," Marcus said, adjusting the shoulders on a charcoal suit. "You look good. Accept it." "I look like I'm playing dress-up." "You look like someone who cleans up well." Vivian appeared beside him, examining the fit. "Marcus is right. This is perfect."
Ethan looked at himself in the three-way mirror. The suit was simple, charcoal gray, clean lines, nothing flashy, but it fit well, and he had to admit Marcus and Vivian were right. He didn't look ridiculous. He looked like someone who might actually belong at a corporate fundraiser. "How much?" he asked. Marcus quoted a number that made Ethan's stomach drop. "That's but says it's what good suits cost," Vivian said gently. "And you'll get years out of it. Job interviews, Sophie's future graduations, weddings. Still a lot. Which is why I'm loaning you the money. We talked about this." They bought the suit, plus a white shirt and a tie that Vivian picked out over his protests. When the total rang up, Ethan made a mental note of the exact amount. He'd pay her back. Every penny. They walked out of Nordstrom into late afternoon drizzle, Ethan carrying his purchases in a Nordstrom bag that felt both exciting and completely foreign. "Thank you," he said, "for helping with this. You've thanked me 3 times already." "I mean it, though." Vivian stopped walking and turned to face him. "I know you do, and I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this because I feel sorry for you. I'm doing it because I want you at that fundraiser, with me. Because being around you makes everything else bearable. Even boring corporate events? Especially boring corporate events." He kissed her right there on the sidewalk, not caring about the shoppers hurrying past or the rain starting to pick up. When they pulled apart, Vivian was smiling. "Wednesday," she said, 7 p.m. "I'll pick you up. I'll be ready." "I know you will." She kissed him once more, then disappeared into the parking garage, leaving Ethan standing on the sidewalk with a Nordstrom bag and the feeling that his life had just shifted in a direction he hadn't seen coming. He drove home through rush hour traffic, his phone buzzing with a message from Sophie via Sarah's phone. "Did you get a fancy suit?" "I did. Are you going to look handsome?" "I'm going to look uncomfortable, but maybe handsome too. Take pictures. I want to see." "Deal." Wednesday night, a corporate fundraiser. Vivian Hart on his arm, and a room full of people who'd know exactly what he was the moment he opened his mouth. He should be terrified. Instead, he was just excited to see her again. Wednesday arrived with the inevitability of a deadline Ethan couldn't postpone. He spent the morning at the shop working through a backlog of oil changes and trying not to think about the evening ahead. Sophie had convinced Sarah to let her stay over so she could help him get ready, which meant his apartment was currently occupied by an 8-year-old fashion consultant with strong opinions. "The tie is crooked," Sophie announced from where she sat on his bed, watching him struggle with the knot for the 3rd time. "I know it's crooked. I'm trying to fix it. You're making it worse. Let me help." "You're 8. You don't know how to tie a tie. YouTube does." She held up Sarah's phone, displaying a tutorial video. "See? Over, under, through the loop." Ethan gave up and let his daughter talk him through the steps, following the video's instructions, while Sophie provided commentary. By the 4th attempt, the tie actually looked presentable. "There," Sophie said with satisfaction. "Now you look fancy." He examined himself in the bathroom mirror. The charcoal suit fit perfectly, the white shirt was crisp, and the tie, thanks to YouTube and Sophie, looked almost professional. But the face staring back at him still looked like a mechanic playing dress-up. "I don't know if I can do this, Soph." "Yes, you can. You're brave." "I'm really not." "You are. You fix broken things even when they're scary. You helped that lady in the rain even though you were late. You're the bravest person I know." Ethan pulled his daughter into a hug, breathing in her strawberry shampoo and wondering what he'd done to deserve a kid this perceptive. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just never listen." Sarah appeared in the doorway, phone in hand. "Okay, I need photos before Vivian gets here. Stand by the window." "Sarah, non-negotiable. Sophie wants pictures, and what Sophie wants, Sophie gets." They spent 10 minutes taking photos that would probably never see the light of day, Sarah directing him like a professional photographer, while Sophie critiqued his poses. By the time the doorbell rang at 6:50, Ethan was equal parts relieved and terrified. He opened the door and forgot how to breathe. Vivian stood in the hallway wearing a floor-length black dress that somehow managed to be elegant and devastating at the same time. Her hair was pulled back, revealing a neck that Ethan suddenly wanted to kiss, and her makeup was subtle but perfect. "Wow," he managed. "Yeah?" She smiled, a bit uncertain. "It's not too much?"
It's perfect. You're perfect. You clean up pretty well yourself. She stepped inside and Sophie immediately launched herself forward. You look like a princess, a CEO princess. Vivian laughed. Thank you, Sophie. That's the look I was going for. Sarah emerged from the kitchen, took one look at them together, and grinned. Okay, I need a picture of both of you, for the record books. Sarah, we're going to be late. 30 seconds, stand together. They posed awkwardly by the door while Sarah snapped photos and Sophie provided direction. When they finally escaped to the hallway, Ethan felt like he'd just survived a red carpet premiere. Your family is intense, Vivian said as they walked to the elevator. They mean well. Sophie's been planning my outfit since Monday. She did a good job. That tie is perfect. YouTube helped. The Jaguar was waiting in the parking lot, and Ethan held the passenger door open for Vivian before walking around to the driver's side. She'd already offered him the keys without asking, like she knew he'd need something familiar to hold on to tonight. The fundraiser was being held at the Seattle Art Museum, which meant downtown traffic and valet parking and the kind of entrance that made Ethan's palms sweat. He handed the keys to a valet who looked about 19 and probably made more in tips than Ethan made in a week. Ready? Vivian asked, linking her arm through his. Not even a little bit. Good. Honesty is refreshing. She squeezed his arm. Just stay close to me and smile when people talk. You'll be fine. They walked through the museum's grand entrance into a space that had been transformed into something out of a magazine spread. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, servers circulating with champagne, and appetizers that probably had French names Ethan couldn't pronounce. Everyone was dressed in formal wear that made his Nordstrom suit look budget. This is insane, he murmured. This is normal. Vivian grabbed 2 glasses of champagne from a passing server. For them, anyway. Drink. It helps. He took a sip and immediately regretted it. The champagne was dry and expensive and tasted like regret. You hate it, Vivian observed. It's very bubbly. There's a bar in the corner. They have beer if you want something less pretentious. Yes, please. They made their way through the crowd, Vivian stopping every few feet to greet people Ethan didn't recognize. Board members, investors, CEOs of companies he'd seen advertised during football games. Everyone wanted a moment with Vivian Hart, and she navigated the conversations with practiced ease. Ethan got his beer, a local IPA that tasted infinitely better than the champagne, and stood slightly behind Vivian, trying to be invisible while she conducted business disguised as small talk. Vivian, darling, a woman in her 60s approached, dripping in diamonds. I haven't seen you since the Grayson acquisition. How did that turn out? Exactly as projected, Helen. We finalized last month. Brilliant. And who's this? Helen's gaze landed on Ethan with the kind of assessment that made him feel like livestock at auction. This is Ethan Cole, like Ethan, Helen Bradshaw. She sits on our board. Nice to meet you. Ethan shook her hand, very aware of his calloused palms against her soft skin. Cole, Helen repeated, like she was filing it away for later research. What do you do, Ethan? I'm a mechanic. I own a repair shop in Georgetown. Helen's eyebrows rose slightly. How industrious. Vivian, I need to steal you for a moment. There's someone from the Times who wants to discuss the expansion. I'll be right there. Vivian turned to Ethan. Will you be okay for a few minutes? Yeah, go do your thing. She kissed his cheek and disappeared into the crowd with Helen, leaving Ethan standing alone with his beer, surrounded by people who probably owned vacation homes worth more than his entire existence. He found a spot near one of the art installations, some abstract sculpture that looked like melted metal, and tried to look busy examining it. Around him, conversations flowed about stock prices and vacation homes in Tuscany and children at boarding schools in Switzerland. Interesting piece, isn't it? Ethan turned to find a man about his age, tall and polished in a tuxedo that probably cost more than the Jaguar. He had the kind of confident stance that came from never being told no. Sure, Ethan said noncommittally. Marcus Wellington. The man extended his hand. I don't think we've met. Ethan Cole. Ah, the mechanic. Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. Vivian mentioned you. Something in his tone made Ethan's shoulders tense. Did she? We used to date, you know, Vivian and I, before she decided she preferred her work to actual relationships. Marcus took a sip of his drink. How long have you two been seeing each other? Not long. Let me guess. She swooped in like some kind of corporate fairy godmother, offered to save your failing business, and now here you are, in a rented suit, pretending you belong? Ethan's grip tightened on his beer bottle. It's not rented. My apologies. Bought, then. With her money, I'm assuming? With money I borrowed and will pay back. Of course. Marcus's smile widened. That's what she does, you know, finds broken things and tries to fix them. Last year it was a nonprofit in Tacoma. Year before that, some artist in Portland. She gets bored eventually and moves on to the next project. I'm not a project. Aren't you? Think about it. Struggling mechanic, single father, shop on the verge of foreclosure. You're exactly the type of charity case that makes her feel better about having more money than sense. Heat crawled up Ethan's neck, but he kept his voice level. You sound like someone who got dumped and never got over it. Marcus's expression went cold. I broke up with her. Sure you did. Because she's incapable of caring about anything except her company. You think you're special? You think she actually sees you as anything other than a distraction from quarterly reports? Marcus leaned in slightly. She'll get tired of playing mechanic's girlfriend, and when she does, you'll be exactly where you were before, except now you'll have debt to her on top of everything else. Ethan wanted to throw his beer in Marcus's smug face, wanted to defend Vivian, defend himself, defend whatever fragile thing they were building together. But part of him, the scared, practical part that had been whispering doubt since the beginning, wondered if Marcus was right. Thanks for the advice, he said tightly. I'll keep it in mind. You do that. Marcus straightened his cufflinks. And when she inevitable moves on, don't say I didn't warn you. He walked away, disappearing into the crowd, and Ethan stood alone by the melted metal sculpture, feeling like he'd been punched in the stomach. Because what if Marcus was right? What if this whole thing, the dates, the contract, the suit, was just Vivian trying to fix something broken? What if he was exactly what Marcus said, a charity case that made her feel better about her wealth? There you are. Ethan turned to find Vivian approaching, looking relieved. I thought I'd lost you. Helen talks forever about absolutely nothing. Are you okay? You look pale. I'm fine, just not used to this crowd. Yeah, there are a lot. She took his hand, her fingers warm against his. Come on. There's someone I want you to meet. The director of the children's hospital we're supporting tonight. She's actually interesting, unlike most people here. But Ethan couldn't shake Marcus's words as Vivian led him through the crowd. Charity case. Project. Distraction. They spent the next hour circulating, Vivian introducing him to what felt like hundreds of people whose names he immediately forgot. Most were polite but distant, clearly unsure what to make of the mechanic on Vivian Hart's arm. A few were openly curious, asking about his shop like it was some kind of exotic specimen they'd never encountered before. Dinner was served in the museum's grand hall, a 5-course meal that Ethan picked at while conversations about market trends and political donations swirled around him. Vivian sat beside him, occasionally squeezing his hand under the table when she sensed him tensing. You're doing great, she whispered during a lull. I'm sitting here nodding while people talk about things I don't understand. That's 90% of these events. Nobody actually knows what they're talking about. They're just better at pretending. After dinner, there were speeches. The museum director, the hospital director, someone from the mayor's office. Ethan tuned most of it out, watching instead the way Vivian's expression shifted when she thought no one was looking. Tired, lonely, like she was performing a role she'd perfected but never really wanted. The dancing started around 9:30, a live band playing standards that Ethan vaguely recognized from his grandmother's record collection. Couples filled the dance floor, swaying in practiced rhythm. We should dance, Vivian said. I don't know how. Neither do half the people out there. Come on. She pulled him onto the floor before he could protest, and they found a spot near the edge where Ethan hoped his incompetence would be less visible. Vivian placed his hand on her waist, took his other hand in hers, and started swaying. Just follow my lead, she said. You'll be fine. He wasn't fine. He stepped on her foot twice in the first 30 seconds, apologizing profusely while she laughed. Relax, she said. It's just dancing. Easy for you to say. You're not the one stepping on people. I've had lessons since I was 6. You're doing fine for someone who's learning on the fly. They found a rhythm eventually, swaying more than actually dancing, but it worked. Ethan was hyper-aware of her hand in his, the warmth of her waist under his palm, the way she fit against him despite the 4-inch height difference created by her heels. "Thank you for coming tonight," Vivian said quietly. "I know this isn't your scene." "It's really not. But you came anyway." "You asked me to." She looked up at him, and something shifted in her expression. "Ethan, Ms. Hart, may I cut in?" Marcus appeared beside them, wearing that same confident smile. Vivian's expression went cold. "Marcus, no, you may not. Just one dance, for old time's sake." "We don't have old times. We have a past I'd rather forget." "That's harsh, Viv." "Don't call me that." She tightened her grip on Ethan's hand. "We were just leaving, actually." "Really? It's barely 10. The Vivian Hart I knew never left events early, too worried about offending donors." Marcus turned to Ethan. "Has she told you yet? About how work always comes first? How every relationship she's ever had has ended because she can't turn off CEO mode long enough to actually be a person?" "Marcus, that's enough," Vivian said sharply. "I'm just trying to help the guy out. He should know what he's getting into. The late-night calls, the canceled plans, the way she'll choose a board meeting over your birthday every single time." Ethan felt Vivian's hand trembling in his, saw the way her jaw was set, her eyes bright with either anger or tears or both. And something in him snapped. "You know what I think?" Ethan said, his voice calm. "I think you're a bitter asshole who can't handle that she's moved on." Marcus's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. She dumped you, and yeah, I'm sure she dumped you, not the other way around, and you never got over it. So now you're standing here trying to sabotage whatever she has with me, because if you can't have her, nobody should." "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about. I know cars, and when an engine is making noise, it's usually because something's broken and trying to compensate. That's you. Broken and loud." Several nearby couples had stopped dancing to watch. Marcus's face was turning red. "You're comparing me to a broken engine?" "Yeah, specifically a blown head gasket. All noise, no substance, and expensive to fix." Ethan stepped closer, still holding Vivian's hand. "She's not a project, or a charity case, or whatever narrative you're selling yourself. She's a person who actually gives a damn about the people in her life. And if you couldn't see that when you had her, that's your failure, not hers." Marcus looked like he was about to say something, then apparently thought better of it. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd with whatever dignity he had left. Ethan turned back to Vivian, who was staring at him with wide eyes. "Did you just compare my ex-boyfriend to a blown head gasket?" It was the best metaphor I could think of on short notice. She started laughing, real, helpless laughter that made several people glance over. "That was the most absurd thing I've ever heard. But it worked. It absolutely worked." She pulled him close, not dancing anymore, just holding him. "Thank you for that, for defending me." He was being an asshole. He was. But most people just let him talk. You actually shut him down. They stood there on the dance floor, other couples swaying around them, and Ethan realized something. Marcus's words had gotten under his skin because part of him believed them. But watching Vivian laugh, feeling her relax against him, he understood that the fear was his, not hers. She wasn't trying to fix him. She was just trying to be with him. "Can we leave?" Vivian asked quietly. "I know it's early, but I've smiled at enough people for one night. Please, I've been ready to leave since we got here." They collected their coats and slipped out through a side entrance, avoiding the main crowd. The valet brought the Jaguar around, and Ethan tipped him with the last of his cash before sliding into the driver's seat. "Where to?" he asked. "Anywhere but here." He drove aimlessly through Seattle's downtown streets, the city lights reflecting off rain-slicked pavement. Vivian had kicked off her heels and was sitting sideways in the passenger seat, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You're quiet," he said. "I'm thinking." "About?" "About how you just humiliated Marcus Wellington in front of half of Seattle's business elite, using a car metaphor." "Was that bad? I probably shouldn't have." "It was perfect. She reached over and took his hand. Nobody's ever stood up for me like that before. Really? You're Vivian Hart. You have lawyers and bodyguards, and I have people who protect my business interests. That's different from someone protecting me. She squeezed his hand. Marcus was right about one thing. I do choose work over relationships. I have for years. It's easier than risking getting hurt. Ethan pulled into an empty parking lot overlooking Elliott Bay, killed the engine, and turned to face her. What changed? You did. Showing up on that rainy road, fixing my car without wanting anything, looking at me like I'm just Vivian, not Hart Industries. She unbuckled her seatbelt and shifted closer. I'm terrified of this, Ethan. Of us. Because if I let myself care about you and it doesn't work out, I don't know how to come back from that. Join the club. I'm terrified too. Of what? That Marcus is right. That you're going to wake up one day and realize you can do better than a broke mechanic who can barely keep his shop open. Is that what you think? That this is about charity? Isn't it? You're offering me contracts, buying me suits, loaning you money for a suit, and the contract is business, not charity. Morrison would have told me if your shop couldn't handle the work. She cupped his face with both hands. I'm not trying to fix you, Ethan. I'm trying to be with you. There's a difference. What if I screw this up? What if I'm not enough? Then we'll deal with it. But I'm tired of being afraid of what might happen. I want to try. With you. He kissed her then, tasting champagne and lipstick and the kind of honesty that only came from people who'd stopped pretending. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Vivian was smiling. Take me home, she said. Your place or mine? Mine. I want you to see where I actually live, not just where I work. She directed him to a high-rise in Belltown, one of those glass and steel towers that scrape the Seattle sky. The parking garage was all concrete and security cameras, and Ethan felt distinctly out of place parking the Jaguar between a Tesla and a Porsche. The elevator required a key card to access the penthouse level. They rode up in silence, Vivian leaning against him, her head on his shoulder. Fair warning, she said as the doors opened directly into her apartment. It's not exactly homey. That was an understatement. The penthouse was all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture that looked expensive and uncomfortable. The view of Seattle's skyline was stunning, but the space felt cold, unlived in. You're right, Ethan said. This isn't homey. I'm never here long enough to make it homey. I sleep, shower, change clothes, and go back to work. She walked to the windows, looking out at the city. I bought it because my realtor said it was a good investment. I've lived here 3 years and I still don't know my neighbors. Ethan joined her at the window. That's depressing. I know. You should get plants or something. Art on the walls, maybe some photos. I have art. It came with the staging when I bought the place. That doesn't count as art. That's just expensive wallpaper. She laughed. You sound like Sophie. Sophie's smart. They stood at the window looking out at the city lights, and Ethan wrapped his arm around her waist. She leaned into him, and for a moment everything was quiet except the distant hum of traffic far below. I don't want this, Vivian said quietly. The apartment? This life. Working 80 hours a week, coming home to empty rooms, measuring success by quarterly earnings. She turned to face him. I want what you have. Sophie waiting for you at home, your sister checking in, a life that's messy and real and actually matters. My life is barely held together by good intentions and duct tape. I know, but at least it's a life. This is just existing. Ethan pulled her close, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. So change it. It's not that simple. Why not? Because the company needs me. The board, the employees, the shareholders. What about what you need? She didn't answer, just buried her face against his shoulder. They stood like that for a long time. Two people from completely different worlds trying to figure out if the space between them could ever actually close. Stay tonight, Vivian said finally. Please, I don't want to be alone. Okay. She led him to the bedroom, which was just as sterile as the rest of the apartment. They kicked off their shoes and collapsed onto the bed fully clothed, too tired to do anything except hold each other. This isn't what I expected, Ethan said. What did you expect? I don't know. Something more dramatic, passionate speech, grand gesture, that kind of thing. Real life is messier than movies. Yeah, it really is. They fell asleep like that, still in their formal clothes, Vivian's head on his chest and his arm around her waist. When Ethan woke up a few hours later, he found her already awake, watching him in the dim light from the windows. "Hi," he said. "Hi, I was just thinking." "About?" "About how I want this to work. Us. I want it so badly it scares me." "Me too. But I don't know how to balance everything. The company, the board expectations, the fact that my life is scheduled down to 15-minute increments. So we figure it out together." She smiled, but it was sad. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple. We both want this. Everything else is just logistics." "Logistics like me working 16-hour days and you having a daughter who needs her father? Logistics like finding time that actually matters. Quality over quantity." "You're surprisingly optimistic for someone who was convinced this wouldn't work 3 days ago." "I'm allowed to change my mind, especially after you laughed at my blown head gasket metaphor." She kissed him, soft and slow, and Ethan decided that whatever logistics they needed to figure out, they'd manage. Because this, lying in bed with Vivian Hart at 4 a.m., both of them still dressed for a fundraiser they'd escaped hours ago, this was worth fighting for. They talked until the sun started rising over the Olympics, painting Seattle's skyline in shades of orange and pink. Talked about Sophie and the shop and Vivian's expansion plans for Hart Industries. Talked about fears and hopes and all the messy complications that came with trying to build something real. When Ethan finally left at 6:30 to get home before Sophie woke up, Vivian walked him to the elevator wearing one of his dress shirts and looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. "Thank you," she said, "for last night, for defending me, for staying. Thank you for inviting me, even though I spent most of the night terrified. You hit it well." She kissed him one more time. "Come to dinner Friday. My place. I'll cook." "You cook?" "I can reheat takeout very effectively. Don't underestimate me." He laughed and stepped into the elevator, watching her wave as the doors closed. The ride down felt surreal, like he was descending from some alternate reality back into his actual life. But when he got to his truck and checked his phone, there was already a message from her. "I miss you already. Is that pathetic?" He smiled and typed back, "Only if it's pathetic that I feel the same way." "Then we're both pathetic. I can live with that." Ethan drove home through early morning traffic, still wearing his suit from the night before, and felt something shift in his chest. The fear was still there. Fear of failure. Fear of not being enough. Fear of this whole thing crashing down around them. But alongside the fear was something else. Something that felt a lot like hope. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ethan Cole allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things were going to work out. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of work and stolen moments. The Hart Industries fleet contract started on schedule, which meant Ethan was suddenly drowning in oil changes and brake jobs and diagnostic work that actually paid on time. He hired back his former employee, Marcus, not Wellington, thank God, but Marcus Chen, a 24-year-old who could diagnose transmission problems by sound alone and didn't mind working overtime. "Boss, we've got 6 more vehicles scheduled for tomorrow," Marcus said on a Friday afternoon, wiping grease from his hands. "You want me to come in early?" "Yeah, 7:30? Ethan was under a Hart Industries van, replacing a worn serpentine belt. "And Marcus? Stop calling me boss, it's weird." "What should I call you?" "Ethan works fine." "That's also weird. You're the guy who signs my paychecks." "I'm the guy who's currently lying in a puddle of transmission fluid. Call me Ethan." Marcus laughed and headed to the office to close out the day's paperwork. The shop had transformed over the past weeks, cleaner, more organized, actually functional. They'd repainted the bay doors, fixed the flickering lights, and Ethan had finally replaced the ancient computer with something from this decade. His phone buzzed. Vivian. "Still coming to dinner tonight?" He smiled and typed back with greasy fingers. "Wouldn't miss it. What are we having?" "Thai takeout from that place in Ballard you like." "I thought you were cooking." "I am. I'm reheating very aggressively. It counts. Can't argue with that logic." "Pick up Sophie at 6, be there by 7? "Perfect. She can help me set the table. I've been practicing my hostess skills." Ethan finished the belt replacement, closed up the van, and locked the shop at 5:30. The drive to Sarah's house took 20 minutes through Friday traffic, and he found Sophie waiting on the porch with an overnight bag. Finally, She ran to the truck. "I've been ready for an hour." "The text said 6, Soph. It's only 5:50. "That's basically 6. She climbed into the passenger seat, buckling herself in. "Are we really having dinner at Vivian's penthouse, the one with the big windows?" "Yeah, and you need to be on your best behavior." "I'm always on my best behavior." "You reorganized her kitchen last time without asking." "It needed organizing. She had canned goods mixed with pasta. That's chaos." Sarah appeared in the doorway, grinning. "Have fun, you two. And Ethan, don't screw this up." "Thanks for the vote of confidence." "I mean it. She's good for you. You've been smiling for 3 weeks straight." "It's unsettling, but also kind of great." They drove to Vivian's building, Sophie chattering about a school project on planets and asking questions about whether rich people had different gravity in their apartments. Ethan let her talk, enjoying the normalcy of his daughter's rambling theories about penthouse physics. The doorman recognized them now, which was both convenient and slightly surreal. "Evening, Mr. Cole. Miss Sophie. Miss Hart is expecting you." "Thanks, Raymond." They rode the elevator up, Sophie bouncing on her toes with barely contained excitement. When the doors opened directly into Vivian's apartment, they found her in the kitchen, surrounded by takeout containers and looking adorably flustered. "I may have ordered too much food," she announced. "I wasn't sure what Sophie liked, so I got one of everything." "Everything?" Ethan surveyed the counter. There had to be 15 containers. The menu was extensive. I panicked. Sophie pushed past him and immediately started opening containers. "Ooh, pad thai, and spring rolls, and what's this one?" "Massaman curry. It's mild, I think. The guy at the restaurant promised it wasn't too spicy for kids." "I love spicy." Sophie grabbed a spring roll and bit into it. "This is amazing. Can we eat here every week?" "Sophie, manners," Ethan warned. "What? I said please, in my head." Vivian laughed and started setting out plates. "She's fine. And yes, Sophie, you can eat here whenever you want. I like having people around. The apartment feels less like a museum." They ate at the dining table Vivian had probably never used before. Sophie entertaining them with stories about her teacher's obsession with proper comma usage and her best friend's theory that pigeons were actually government surveillance drones. Vivian listened with genuine interest, asking questions and laughing at Sophie's increasingly elaborate conspiracy theories. "You're really good with her," Ethan said quietly, while Sophie was distracted examining the view. "She's easy to be good with. She's smart and funny and honest." Vivian squeezed his hand under the table, kind of like her dad. "I'm not that funny." "You compared my ex to a blown head gasket. That's comedy gold." After dinner, Sophie claimed the couch and immediately fell asleep watching a nature documentary about penguins, apparently her current obsession. Ethan covered her with a throw blanket while Vivian cleaned up the takeout containers. "She's out," he reported, joining Vivian in the kitchen. "Good. I wanted to talk to you about something." Vivian's expression had shifted to something more serious. "The board meeting is next week. They're voting on the Southeast Asia expansion." "That's good, right?" "You've been working on that for months." "It's complicated. There's a faction that thinks we're expanding too fast. They want to slow down, consolidate, play it safe." She leaned against the counter. "If the vote doesn't go my way, it could undermine everything I've been building." "What do you need?" "Honestly, I need to remember why I'm doing this, the company, the expansion, all of it. Lately, it feels like I'm just going through motions because it's what's expected." Ethan pulled her close, and she melted against him. "So why are you doing it?" "Because it's what my father would have wanted, what he spent his entire life building." "That's not an answer. What do you want?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know anymore. I used to know. When I took over after he died, it was so clear. Make the company bigger, better, more successful, prove I deserve to be there. But now?" She pulled back to look at him. "Now I spend 80 hours a week in meetings, and I come home to an empty apartment, and I wonder what the point is." "The point is, whatever you decide it is, you're the CEO. You make the rules." "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because there are shareholders and board members and 40,000 employees whose livelihoods depend on me making the right decisions." "And what about your livelihood? Your happiness? When does that factor in?" She didn't answer, just buried her face against his shoulder. They stood like that in her sterile kitchen, surrounded by empty takeout containers, and the quiet sound of Sophie's breathing from the living room. I'm tired, Vivian said finally. I'm so tired of performing, of being Vivian Hart, CEO, instead of just Vivian. So stop performing, at least when you're here, with me. I don't know how. Then learn. We'll figure it out together. They moved to the living room, careful not to wake Sophie, and sat on the floor with their backs against the couch. Vivian leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her. Tell me about your day, she said. The real stuff, not the sanitized version. So he did. Told her about the van with the mysterious rattle that turned out to be a loose heat shield, about Marcus accidentally ordering the wrong brake pads and having to rush order replacements, about the customer who'd tried to argue that oil changes were a scam invented by mechanics to steal money. What did you tell him? Vivian asked. That he was welcome to never change his oil and see what happens. He changed his mind real fast. She laughed, and it sounded lighter than earlier. I wish I could do that. Just tell board members they're being idiots and watch them backtrack. You're the CEO. You can do whatever you want. That's not how it works. Why not? What are they going to do? Fire you? You own controlling interest. They could make things difficult, orchestrate a vote of no confidence, leak things to the press. So let them. You built this company into what it is. If they don't see that, they're the idiots, not you. Vivian sat up, looking at him with something like wonder. You actually believe that? Of course I do. You're brilliant. You took over a company at 23 and turned it into an empire. That's not luck. That's skill. Or obsession. Same thing sometimes. She kissed him, soft and slow, and Ethan tasted pad thai and possibility. When they pulled apart, Sophie was still asleep on the couch, completely oblivious to the adult conversations happening 3 feet away. Stay tonight, Vivian said. Both of you. I have a guest room Sophie can use. I want to wake up and have breakfast with you. I want normal, just for one morning. Okay. They carried Sophie to the guest room, which was as sterile as the rest of the apartment, but at least had a comfortable bed, and tucked her in. She mumbled something about penguins and rolled over without waking. In Vivian's bedroom, they changed into comfortable clothes and climbed into bed. No dramatic declarations, no passionate scenes straight out of a movie. Just two people exhausted from their respective days, finding comfort in being close. Ethan? Vivian's voice was quiet in the darkness. Yeah? What if the board votes against the expansion? What if I fail? Then you fail. And you figure out the next move. That's what you do. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. Failing isn't the end of the world. It's just information. You adjust and try something different. She was quiet for a moment. Is that what you did? When your shop was failing? I didn't have a choice. I had Sophie depending on me. I couldn't afford to give up. But you wanted to. It wasn't a question. Ethan stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of her understanding. Yeah, he admitted. There were days I wanted to just walk away. Sell the equipment, close up shop, get a job working for someone else. But then Sophie would ask me about my day, and I'd remember why I was fighting, not for me, for her. That's what I'm missing, a why that actually matters. So find one. I don't know where to start. Start with what makes you happy, not what's expected or what looks good on paper. What actually makes you happy? She rolled to face him, her expression barely visible in the dim light from the windows. This. You and Sophie in my apartment, Thai takeout at my dining table. Feeling like this place is actually a home instead of just somewhere I sleep between meetings. Then do more of this. It's not that easy. Why not? Because I have responsibilities, obligations. So do I. I have a kid, a shop, bills to pay, but I also have this, us, and I'm choosing to make room for both. You're choosing to make room for a relationship that's barely a month old? Yeah, because it matters. You matter. Vivian kissed him then, and there was something different in it. Desperate and hopeful and scared all at once. When they pulled apart, she was crying. I don't know how to do this, she said. How to balance everything. How to be a CEO and also be a person who has relationships and hobbies and a life outside of quarterly reports. So figure it out. You're good at solving problems. Solve this one. What if I can't? Then we'll figure it out together. That's what people do when they care about each other. They figure shit out. She laughed through her tears.
You're very practical for someone who fixes cars for a living. Someone has to be. You're too busy being brilliant and terrified to be practical. They fell asleep holding each other, and when Ethan woke up the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the windows and Sophie was standing in the doorway looking deeply amused. "You're cuddling," she announced. "Sophie, privacy," Ethan groaned. "It's 8:30. That's late. Vivian said we could make pancakes for breakfast." She paused. "But you have to stop cuddling first." Vivian was already awake, her hair a mess and her eyes soft with sleep. "I did promise pancakes, though I should warn you, I've never actually made them before." "That's okay. I'll help." Sophie disappeared toward the kitchen, and they could hear her opening cabinets. "She's reorganizing your kitchen again," Ethan said. "I know. I'm letting her. It probably needs it." They got up and joined Sophie in the kitchen, where she'd already located pancake mix and was reading the instructions with intense concentration. "It says we need eggs, milk, and oil. Do you have those?" Vivian opened the refrigerator, which contained approximately 3 items. "I have bottled water, leftover takeout, and is that yogurt expired?" "It's from February," Ethan observed. "It's definitely expired." "I don't grocery shop much." "We noticed." They ended up ordering groceries delivered while Sophie made a list of everything they needed for proper pancakes. An hour later, armed with fresh ingredients, they attempted breakfast. The first batch burned. The second batch was somehow raw in the middle. The third batch was actually edible. "Success!" Sophie announced, drowning her pancakes in syrup. "We're basically professional chefs now." "Let's not get carried away," Ethan said, but he was smiling. They spent the morning in Vivian's apartment, Sophie teaching Vivian how to play a card game she'd invented that had rules that changed every 5 minutes. Ethan watched them together, his daughter's laughter mixing with Vivian's, and felt something settle in his chest. This could work. This was working. Around noon, Vivian's phone started buzzing with work calls. She ignored the first 3, then sighed and checked the 4th. "I'm sorry, it's the board chair. I have to take this." She disappeared into her home office, and Ethan could hear her voice shift into CEO mode. Crisp, professional, all business. Sophie looked up from her cards. "Is she okay?" "Yeah, kiddo, just work stuff." "She works a lot." "She does." "Do you think that makes her happy?" Ethan considered the question. "I think she's figuring out what makes her happy. Sometimes that takes time." "You should help her figure it out. You're good at fixing things. People aren't cars, Soph. You can't just replace a part and make them work better. But you can help them find what's broken, and then they can fix it themselves." She played a card. "That's what you did for me, after Mom left. You helped me find what was broken, and then you helped me fix it." Ethan's throat tightened. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You just never listen." Vivian emerged from her office 20 minutes later, looking tired. "I'm sorry, board drama. Apparently there's a faction trying to delay the expansion vote. Can they do that?" "If they have enough support, yeah." She sank onto the couch. "I might need to do damage control this weekend. Make some calls, smooth some feathers." "Or," Ethan said carefully, "you could let them delay the vote and use the time to figure out what you actually want." "I want the expansion to go through." "Do you? Or is that just what you think you're supposed to want?" Vivian stared at him. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? You just told me last night you don't know why you're doing this anymore. Maybe the delay is a chance to figure that out. I can't just stop working because I'm having an existential crisis." "I'm not saying stop working. I'm saying maybe take a breath. Maybe remember that you're allowed to want things that aren't about quarterly earnings." Sophie, who'd been pretending not to listen, looked up. "Like pancakes, and card games, and people who make you smile." Vivian laughed, but it sounded watery. "You two are ganging up on me." "We're helping," Sophie corrected. "There's a difference." The weekend passed in a strange limbo. Vivian made her calls, did her damage control, prepared for the board meeting. But she also made time for dinners with Ethan and Sophie, for walks around the neighborhood, for movie nights where they argued about whether penguins or dolphins were superior animals. Monday arrived too fast. Ethan dropped Sophie at school and headed to the shop, where Marcus was already working on the morning's scheduled vehicles. The day passed in the familiar rhythm of diagnostics and repairs,
but Ethan found himself checking his phone more than usual. Vivian's board meeting was at 2. She'd texted that morning. Wish me luck. Or don't. I'm not sure which I want. He'd sent back. You don't need luck. You're Vivian Hart. You've got this. At 3:30, his phone rang. How'd it go? He answered. Vivian's laugh was slightly hysterical. I quit. You what? I told the board I'm stepping down as CEO. Effective in 6 months, once we find a replacement. Ethan's brain stuttered. You? Wait, what? I quit. Well, I'm quitting. In 6 months, after we complete the transition. She sounded breathless, like she'd just run a marathon. I can't keep doing this, Ethan. I can't spend my entire life in meetings about things I don't care about anymore. I'm 30 years old, and I've never done anything just because I wanted to. It's always been about the company, about my father's legacy, about proving I belong, and I'm done. Vivian, I know it's crazy. I know everyone's going to think I've lost my mind. But sitting in that boardroom, listening to them argue about market projections, all I could think about was Saturday morning, making pancakes with Sophie, playing that ridiculous card game, being with you. Her voice cracked slightly. That's what I want. Not this. Ethan looked around the shop, at Marcus working under a Hart Industries van, at the schedule board filled with appointments, at the business he'd nearly lost, and was now building back piece by piece. What are you going to do? He asked. I have no idea. Isn't that terrifying and amazing at the same time? It's definitely something. Are you mad? Why would I be mad? Because I'm potentially throwing away everything my father built. Because I'm making a crazy decision without thinking it through. Because I'm probably going to regret this tomorrow. Are you going to regret it tomorrow? She was quiet for a moment. No, I don't think so. Then I'm not mad. I'm proud of you. Really? Really? It takes guts to walk away from something that's not working, even when everyone expects you to stay. I learned that from you. I never quit anything. No, but you keep fighting for what matters. The shop, Sophie, us. You don't waste time on things that don't bring value. I want to do that. I want to figure out what actually matters and invest in that. Ethan smiled, feeling something warm spread through his chest. So what happens now? Now I have 6 months to find my replacement and figure out what comes next. The board wasn't thrilled, but they accepted it. And Ethan? Yeah? Okay. Can I come see you? I need to be around someone who won't tell me I'm making a mistake. Shop's open until 6. Come by whenever. She showed up 45 minutes later, still in her business suit, looking simultaneously terrified and liberated. Marcus took one look at her expression and excused himself to grab coffee, leaving them alone in the office. I really did it, Vivian said, sinking into the desk chair. I quit being CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. You're transitioning out responsibly over 6 months. That's different than quitting. Semantics. She spun the chair slightly. My mother is going to kill me. Your mother lives in France and hasn't called you in 3 months. She's going to call now, trust me. Ethan leaned against the desk. Do you regret it? No. Maybe. I don't know. Ask me in 6 months. She looked up at him. Is it crazy that I'm more excited than scared? No, I think that means you made the right decision. What if I can't find a replacement? What if the company falls apart? Then it falls apart. But that's not your responsibility anymore. You're allowed to let go. She stood and wrapped her arms around him, burying her face against his chest. How are you so calm about this? Because I've had practice failing. You're just getting started. She laughed into his shirt. That's not comforting. It's honest. They stood like that for a while, the sounds of the shop filtering through the office door. Marcus returned with coffee and tactfully disappeared again. Eventually, Vivian pulled back, wiping at her eyes. I should let you work. I just needed to see you. You can stay. Marcus can handle the afternoon schedule. Really? Really? Come on. He took her hand and led her to the small break room behind the office. A cramped space with a microwave, a mini fridge, and a table that had seen better decades. They sat across from each other, drinking terrible coffee from styrofoam cups, and talked about everything and nothing. Vivian told him about the board members' reactions, the mix of shock and disappointment and grudging respect. Told him about the moment she'd announced her decision and felt something break free in her chest, like she'd been holding her breath for 10 years and could finally exhale. Ethan told her about the shop's growing success, about Marcus's terrible jokes, and the customer who'd sent a thank you card for honest service. Told her about Sophie's latest penguin obsession and Sarah's insistence that they have a proper family dinner soon. "I'd like that," Vivian said, "meeting your family properly, not just Sarah stopping by to drop off Sophie. Fair warning, Sarah will interrogate you. She's protective. I can handle protective sisters. I can't handle board meetings anymore, apparently, but sisters I can do." They talked until the shop closed, until Marcus stuck his head in to say goodnight, and Ethan realized it was past 6. They locked up together, Vivian watching as he went through the familiar routine of checking locks and setting alarms. "I never asked," she said as they walked to their cars. "How much do you still owe me?" "For the suit." Ethan pulled out his wallet and handed her a stack of bills. $437. That's everything. She stared at the money. "You didn't have to pay me back so fast." "I said I would. The Heart contract is paying well. I can afford to keep my promises." "Keep it. Consider it a gift." "Vivian, please, let me do this one thing. You've given me so much confidence, perspective, the courage to actually make a change. Let me give you this." He hesitated, then took her hand instead of the money. "How about this? You keep the money, and instead you come to dinner at my place tomorrow. Sophie wants to cook for you. She's planning a menu." "Sophie's 8. What's she planning to cook?" "Spaghetti with a side of dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets. She's very specific about her culinary vision." Vivian laughed. "That sounds perfect. What time?" 6:30. "And Vivian, don't bring wine or flowers or anything expensive. Just bring yourself." "I can do that." She kissed him in the parking lot, under the flickering streetlight, and Ethan thought about how far they'd come from that rainy night when he'd stopped to help a stranger. How a broken-down Jaguar had somehow led to this moment, standing outside his shop with a woman who'd just quit her empire to figure out what actually mattered. The next evening, Vivian showed up at his apartment at 6:30 sharp, wearing jeans and a sweater and carrying nothing but a bottle of sparkling cider. "For Sophie," she explained. "It's fancy, but not alcoholic." Sophie opened the door before Ethan could, already wearing an apron that was 3 sizes too big. "You're here. Come see the kitchen. I've been cooking for an hour." The apartment smelled like tomato sauce and garlic bread, and Sophie had indeed been cooking. The spaghetti was slightly overcooked, the sauce was from a jar, and the dinosaur nuggets were exactly as advertised. But the table was set with care, complete with a construction paper centerpiece Sophie had made at school. "This is amazing," Vivian said, examining the centerpiece. "Did you make this?" "In art class. It's supposed to be flowers, but they look more like explosions." "I tried. I love explosions. They're very artistic." They ate dinner together, Sophie dominating the conversation with theories about whether penguins could survive in space and detailed explanations of her science project. Vivian listened with genuine interest, asking questions and offering suggestions that Sophie considered seriously. After dinner, they played Sophie's invented card game, still with rules that changed constantly, and watched the penguin documentary that Sophie had now seen approximately 40 times. When Sophie finally fell asleep on the couch, Ethan carried her to bed and returned to find Vivian doing dishes. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I want to. This is nice. Normal. Everything my life hasn't been for years. You're going to have a lot more normal now. What are you going to do with 6 months of transition time?" "I honestly don't know. I've been CEO for so long I don't remember what I liked to do before." She dried a plate, examining it like it held answers. "Maybe I'll take a class, learn something completely impractical, or travel somewhere that isn't a business trip. Or you could just rest, figure out what makes you happy. Is it pathetic that what makes me happy is doing dishes in your kitchen while your daughter sleeps on the couch? If it's pathetic, then we're both pathetic, because this makes me happy too." She set down the plate and turned to face him. "I'm falling in love with you. Is that crazy? We've only known each other a month." Ethan's heart kicked against his ribs. "It's crazy, but I'm falling in love with you too, so we're in good company." "What do we do now? We keep doing this. Dinners and dishes and card games with impossible rules. We figure it out as we go." I'm not good at figuring things out without a plan. Then we'll make a plan. Step 1, keep seeing each other. Step 2, see how it goes. Step 3, adjust as needed. That's a terrible plan. It's the only plan I've got. She kissed him, tasting like spaghetti sauce and possibility, and Ethan wrapped his arms around her, feeling the last of his doubts dissolve. This was real. This was working. This was worth every moment of fear and uncertainty. Over the next few months, they built something together that didn't fit any corporate structure or conventional timeline. Vivian spent her weekdays transitioning out of Hart Industries, training her replacement and handling board meetings with a patience she hadn't known she possessed. Her evenings and weekends were split between Ethan's cramped apartment and her slowly warming penthouse. The apartment got plants, art that Vivian actually chose instead of accepting from a stager. Photos of her and Ethan and Sophie at the aquarium at the park, making pancakes in her kitchen. The space transformed from a museum into a home, messy and imperfect and lived in. Ethan's shop continued to grow. The Hart Industries contract led to other contracts, word-of-mouth referrals, a reputation for honest work that actually spread. He hired a second mechanic, upgraded equipment, started thinking about expansion in concrete terms instead of impossible dreams. Sophie adjusted to having Vivian around with the easy acceptance of children who haven't learned to be skeptical yet. She taught Vivian about penguins and card games and the proper way to organize kitchen cabinets. Vivian taught Sophie about business and negotiation and the importance of knowing your worth. Sarah remained skeptical for exactly 2 weeks before declaring that Vivian was acceptable, assuming she doesn't break my brother's heart. Vivian accepted this with grace and won Sarah over completely by helping her navigate a complicated school district bureaucracy issue using corporate contacts and sheer determination. 6 months after the board meeting where Vivian had announced her resignation, she officially stepped down as CEO of Hart Industries. The company threw a farewell party that Vivian attended with Ethan and Sophie, making small talk with board members while Sophie entertained herself by rating the appetizers on a scale she'd invented. The little sandwiches are a 7, Sophie informed a bemused board member. But the shrimp things are a 2, too squishy. Sophie, inside voice, Ethan reminded her. This is my inside voice. My outside voice is much louder. Vivian gave her farewell speech at 9 p.m., thanking everyone for their support and introducing her replacement, a brilliant woman from their Singapore office who'd been Vivian's first choice. Then she found Ethan and Sophie near the dessert table. Can we leave? She asked. I've smiled at enough people for a lifetime. Please, Ethan agreed. Sophie's been eating cake for 20 minutes. We need to leave before she discovers what a sugar high is. They escaped through a side door, Sophie carrying a plate of cookies she'd somehow convinced a waiter to give her, and drove back to Vivian's apartment. On the way, Vivian's phone buzzed constantly with congratulations messages and interview requests that she ignored. You're really done, Ethan said. I'm really done. She sounded lighter than he'd ever heard her. As of midnight tonight, I'm officially unemployed. How does it feel? Terrifying and amazing. Ask me tomorrow if I regret it. But tomorrow came, and the day after, and the weeks that followed, and Vivian never regretted it. She spent a month doing absolutely nothing except sleeping late and taking Sophie to school and learning to cook things that didn't come from takeout containers. Then she started volunteering at a local nonprofit that helped small businesses get financing, using her corporate knowledge for something that felt meaningful. She and Ethan settled into a rhythm that worked for them. Some nights at his apartment, some at hers. Sunday morning pancakes with Sophie. Friday date nights that sometimes involved fancy restaurants but more often involved Thai food and bad movies. Normal, messy, imperfect life that neither of them had experienced before. 8 months after that rainy night when Ethan had stopped to help a stranger, he woke up in Vivian's bed. Their bed now, really, since he spent more nights here than at his own apartment, and found her already awake, watching him. This is creepy, he said. How long have you been staring at me? 5 minutes. You snore. I do not. You absolutely do. It's adorable. He pulled her close, breathing in her shampoo and the coffee she'd clearly already had. What time is it? 7. Sophie has that field trip today. We need to get her to school early. Right, the zoo. He sat up, running a hand through his hair. You're still coming to the shop thing this afternoon? The ribbon cutting? Of course. I wouldn't miss you officially opening the second bay. The expansion had taken 4 months. permits and construction, and Ethan's constant anxiety about whether he was making the right choice. But the shop needed it, and he could finally afford it, and today was the official opening. They picked up Sophie, who spent the entire drive to school explaining everything she knew about penguins in preparation for seeing the real ones at the zoo. When they dropped her off, she hugged them both and ran toward her waiting class. "She called me we," Vivian said quietly. "What?" "When she was talking about the penguins, she said we're going to see them. She included me." Ethan took her hand. "You're part of the we now. Get used to it." The ribbon cutting that afternoon was small, just Sarah and Sophie, Marcus and the shop's other employees, a few regular customers, and Vivian. The local news had offered to cover it, but Ethan had declined. This wasn't about publicity. It was about survival, growth, building something that mattered. Sophie got to cut the ribbon with oversized scissors, declaring the expansion officially awesome. They gave tours of the new bay, showing off the lift and the updated equipment and the office that was actually big enough for filing cabinets. "You did it," Vivian said quietly, while Sophie was distracted examining tools. "You saved the shop." "We did it. The Hart contract made this possible." "The Hart contract was just business. You made this possible by being too stubborn to give up." He kissed her right there in the shop, not caring that Sarah was watching with a knowing smile and Marcus was pretending not to notice. That evening, after Sophie was asleep and they were back at Vivian's apartment, Ethan found her on the balcony, looking out at Seattle's lights. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, joining her. "Just thinking about how different everything is from a year ago. How lost I was. How sure I was that work was all I had. And now? Now I have this. You and Sophie and Sunday pancakes, and a life that's messy and imperfect and exactly what I needed." She leaned against him. "I never thanked you properly." "For what?" "For stopping that night. For fixing my car when you had somewhere else to be. For seeing me as a person instead of a company. You don't have to thank me for that." "I do, though, because nobody else did. For years, I was just Hart Industries. The CEO, the billionaire, the woman who chose work over everything. And you saw past all that to who I actually was." Ethan turned her to face him, seeing the vulnerability in her expression. "You know what I saw that night? Someone stranded and trying to stay in control. Someone who needed help but didn't know how to ask for it. Someone who was tired of being alone. I was all of those things. I know. So was I." They stood on the balcony, the city lights spreading out below them. Two people who'd found each other by accident and built something intentional. There were still complications, always would be. Schedules to coordinate, Sophie's needs to consider. The lingering fear that maybe this was too good to last. But looking at Vivian, seeing her smile in the dim light, Ethan realized something important. Love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone worth the complications, someone who made the messy parts of life bearable and the good parts better. "Move in with me," he said suddenly. Vivian blinked. "What?" "Move in, officially, not just staying over most nights, but actually living together. Your stuff and my stuff and Sophie's dinosaur pajamas all in one place. Ethan, your apartment is tiny. We'd be on top of each other. So we get a bigger place, something that's ours, not mine or yours, somewhere with space for Sophie's homework explosion, and your books, and maybe even a real dining table. That's a big step." "I know, but I'm ready if you are." She was quiet for a long moment, and Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. Maybe it was too fast. Maybe he'd pushed too hard. Maybe... "Yes," Vivian said. "Yes?" "Yes. Let's find a place. Together. Something messy and imperfect and ours." She kissed him, smiling against his lips. "Fair warning, Sophie's going to want to organize everything." "I'm counting on it." They found a house 3 months later, a small craftsman in Ballard, with a yard for Sophie and a garage Ethan could convert to a home workshop, and enough space for all of them to spread out. The kitchen was outdated, the roof needed work, and the whole place required more renovation than either of them wanted to think about. It was perfect. Moving day was chaos. Sarah directed traffic while Sophie marked boxes with her own organizational system that made sense to absolutely no one. Marcus showed up uninvited and helped move furniture while offering running commentary on their decorating choices. By the end of the day, they were exhausted, surrounded by boxes, eating pizza on the floor because they hadn't unpacked the table yet. "This is insane," Vivian said, surveying the disaster zone of their new living room. "This is home," Ethan corrected. Sophie, covered in marker from labeling boxes, looked up from her pizza. "Are we really all living here together now?" "Yeah, kiddo. Is that okay?" "It's better than okay. It's perfect." She grabbed Vivian's hand and Ethan's, pulling them together. "We're a family now, like a real one." Vivian's eyes filled with tears, and Ethan wrapped his arms around both of them. "Yeah, Soph, we're a real family." That night, after Sophie was asleep in her new room and they'd made some progress on unpacking, Ethan and Vivian stood in their bedroom, not his or hers, and looked at each other. "We really did this," Vivian said. "We really did. I quit my job, moved in with a mechanic, and became a stepmom to an 8-year-old penguin enthusiast. Technically, you're not a stepmom yet. We're not married." "Yet?" Ethan's heart stopped. "I mean, if you wanted, eventually," Vivian laughed. "Relax, I'm not proposing, but I like that you said yet." "Me too." They fell asleep in their new house, in their new bed, surrounded by unpacked boxes and plans for tomorrow and the messy, imperfect life they were building together. And when Ethan woke up the next morning to Sophie jumping on their bed and Vivian groaning about coffee, he realized something important. This was it. This was the life he'd been working toward without knowing it. Not perfect, not easy, but real and worth fighting for. A family built from broken pieces that somehow fit together. A home made from chance encounters and second chances, and the simple act of stopping to help someone on a rainy night. Sophie was already rattling off plans for the day, unpacking her room, exploring the neighborhood, checking if the backyard was suitable for penguins, which it definitely wasn't, but she'd argue about it anyway. Vivian was laughing, her hair a mess and her face free of makeup, looking nothing like the polished CEO she'd been, and everything like the person she'd been trying to find. And Ethan, watching them together, thought about that check engine light that was finally fixed, about the shop that was thriving, about the bills that were actually getting paid on time. But mostly, he thought about how sometimes the best things in life came from stopping when you were supposed to keep driving, from taking a chance on someone who seemed wrong on paper but felt right in all the ways that mattered. "Dad," Sophie said, bouncing slightly, "Vivian says we can get pancakes for breakfast if we unpack the kitchen first. But I think we should get pancakes now and unpack later. What do you think?" "I think Vivian's right. We need to unpack first." "Traitor," Sophie accused, but she was grinning. "That's what family does, kiddo. We work together and then celebrate after." "Fine, but I'm picking the restaurant." "Deal." They spent the morning unpacking, arguing about where things should go, creating new systems that would probably change by next week. It was messy and chaotic and occasionally frustrating, but it was theirs. A life built from small moments and big decisions, and the courage to choose happiness over expectations. And when they finally sat down to pancakes at the diner where Ethan and Vivian had their second first date, Sophie raised her orange juice in a toast. "To our family," she said seriously. "To new houses and old cars and penguins." "To penguins," Vivian agreed, clinking her coffee mug against Sophie's glass. "To second chances," Ethan added, "and stopping for strangers in the rain." They drank to that. 3 people who'd found each other through circumstance and choice, building something that didn't fit any conventional definition but worked anyway. Because sometimes love wasn't about finding your perfect match. It was about finding someone willing to make imperfect work. And as Ethan watched his daughter and the woman he loved argue about whether chocolate chip or blueberry pancakes were superior, he realized he wouldn't change a single thing about the messy, complicated, absolutely perfect life they were creating together. Not even the check engine light that had finally, after all this time, stayed off.